Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the GhostComms podcast. I am your host, Jatmon, joined by my co-host, Vishal, and today we have a professional caster and content creator who you probably have seen by this point. We have Panda with us today, Life with Panda on all socials. So
Appreciate that.
thank you for giving us your time. I'm really excited to sit down with you and just kind of pick your brain and get your unique perspective on the industry and the game and competitive and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So firstly, you were at Globals. How was that experience? Because my first LAN was Invitational. How did that stack up to Invitational? And then just talk about the experience overall.
So I was at Invitational as well, and I was at the Fortnite World Cup. So I have a little bit of experience when it comes to the major events that Fortnite has put on, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And when I say Global's the best of the three, I truly mean it was the best of the three. And a lot of people will be like, well, like World Cup was this and World Cup was that.
I saw you did a video on this topic. Yeah.
Exactly. Impact, like the impact for the scene, absolutely. Nothing will hit the virality of what World Cup was. But from a sheer production standpoint, it is a very, very different different experience.
I was making this argument from a competitive perspective as well.
Yeah.
I mean, when you talk about the talent, compared to World Cup, not just the overall skill ceiling, but I think when you take, really the best players across the world platform, you have so many more FNCS titles under the belt, and you have, just so much more at stake, I think, in terms of reputation and competitive career. Like for Cooper, for example, like that cemented him as one of the greats now, as opposed to just a schmuck who got a second in one grands. It was a big moment for a lot of people. So I think from a competitive perspective as well, it was a bigger event than World Cup. And I do think people have that nostalgic bias of oh, World Cup was like the biggest esport event ever, and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, we've moved on. And yes, that was an amazing event. It was awesome. I think it got a lot of people into this space and this competitive scene. But I do think that if you kind of remove the what is it, the rose colored glasses, is that the phrase that you kind of it's it actually did stack up and then some. But I'm glad to hear from a production perspective too. And that's the broadcast quality is something that, because people talk about the decline of competitive recently, and that's always something. It's one of the first things that I cite to say, no, I actually think Epic does care, and that they're really taking these steps, and we're just kind of seeing the beginning steps of them really working towards wanting competitive to be closer to what it has the potential to be. And I think the broadcast quality is a big thing to that.
Well, and the cool thing I think that people overlook more often than not is they're like, oh, look, Oceantics is getting more viewers than the broadcast, or X is getting more viewers than the broadcast, Y, Z. That's what Fortnite wants, right? If Fortnite did not want that, they would not create the additional tools like clean feeds and things like that to support those viewing parties, because they genuinely want the most eyeballs on the event as possible, with a few stipulations, of course. Like me personally, I think it would be cool to see them promote it more in game. I know they do some Legends Landing stuff, and like Globals, they did a really good job of promoting, I think, in game with the battle bus shift and stuff like that. But if they did that every FNCS, I just imagine the difference in viewers the category would get. Because compared to the most recent esport event, League of Legends Worlds, right? League of Legends, probably the most established esport on the planet.
1000%.
Viewership wise was very similar to what Global was for the weekend. And in my opinion, the production quality for Global was higher than that of Worlds this year. Now, that's not to say Worlds every year, to be clear, because last year's Worlds with Lil Nas X and like the floating stuff and all this other crazy, that was insane. But just this year specifically, in my opinion, I felt like Fortnite put on a better show. And I think the more that happens, right, as the esport matures and the scene that we have matures,
Right,
we will see more people flock to Fortnite, because it is, in my opinion, based on the numbers that I've seen, right, and the public numbers that we all have access to, Fortnite is the #1 played game in the world, and it's not even close.
Yeah,
it's not
right. Yeah.
and it's funny because like one of the biggest comparisons I always get is like Valorant. People are like,
Yeah.
oh man, Valorant is like the best game, man. Like so many people play Valorant. There are 22 million unique logins on Valorant a month. On Fortnite, there are 250 million. And that was
Yeah.
before OG Fortnite. So that's not even including what has happened in the
Wasn't
last
the
month.
wasn't the OG number like wasn't the peak like 44, 45 million unique
In a
logins in
day.
one day? Yeah, that's insane.
Yes.
That's
So let that, like, for the people at home that are listening, like, let that sink in for a moment. Valorant is 22 million in a month. Fortnite did that, double that in a day. And
yeah.
like the other esports or the other like games that compare, right? If you want to go like dev studio to dev studio, you got like Apex Legends, which is probably the most similar in comparison, right? It's a younger game. It's got a primarily adult audience, and I think that hurts them in a little some ways. They aren't like culturally present in the game, which I think is what makes a big difference for Fortnite. But that's a whole different topic. And their esport, like viewership wise, did very similar to global. And then their production, I wasn't a huge fan of it, but like that's me from a production eye, right? Like
Yeah,
I
sure.
live in this production world, so I look at it very differently.
Right.
And then their player numbers every month is usually right between 85 million and 120 million, depending on if they've upset the pro scene.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it
yeah.
drops
Right.
dramatically if they
Yeah.
upset the pro scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think like for Valorant, it's like I think when it comes to the game being more like, you know, what's it called? What's the word? Like popular. I think when it comes to that, it's true that Fortnite's more popular and by far, but I think Valorant's competitive system is just a lot better than ours. Like their rank system, their competitive system, I feel like right now they have a better system than ours. I think, but that's because
It's
they've
also
had it set in
easier.
stone for a while.
It's also easier because it's not a BR. I mean, a
Yeah,
BR
that
I
rank
was
too.
system
about to
is
say,
incredibly hard to get that
Right.
perfect balance or whatever. It always feels weird.
and to be fair, right? Valorant, like in my opinion, Valorant is a great esport to watch. It's not one to be a part of, and I think that's why the player base doesn't like there isn't a massive shift in the player base, even though it is a PC only game. And I do believe that if they put that on console, there would be those numbers would jump as well. I don't know if they
100%.
jump to the Fortnite numbers, but
Probably
they
not.
definitely would jump at least double, maybe triple
Yeah,
monthly users, right?
you're just expanding your audience to a different platform.
Which if you pay attention to the way the numbers work, like any console release of a game is 3 to 4 times bigger than the PC numbers on a game, just
Right.
period, right?
Mm.
And people talk about, oh, like why are these console championship cups and things like this coming out? It's like, guys, it's like the majority of the player base. You can give them
Realistically speaking, yeah.
you can give them a little chunk of change, right? When you're getting $10 million in
Yeah.
FNCS funds and whatever
Yeah.
else, right?
Right.
It's like one of those little nuances, but when it comes to the rank system, and I think this is like really important, I think this current rank system is what we've all wanted, minus the siphon
Yeah.
and separation of loot pool, right?
Yeah. Which
And
was exactly
there's
Aussie's take, and I
yeah,
completely agree. I mean, that's the big thing that I've said about the rank system, because everyone's like arena was so much better, and I'm like, it really wasn't.
It was
You're
not.
just missing
It
siphon.
was not.
It really wasn't like the actual progression system and the way you're scored and all of that. Like the brains behind ranked is what the game always should have been. You're just missing siphon. You are missing siphon, and you're missing not dying to a junk rift or something that is
Yeah.
like that feels uncompetitive. And I understand that, but I think the younger minds are not necessarily able to distinguish those minute details when they're just
Yeah.
saying, did I have more fun playing arena or do I have more fun playing ranked? And they just go, oh, I had more fun playing arena, so they just chalk it up to that. And it's like, okay, but what's the reasoning behind that? And that's something that you mentioned maturity earlier of the player base, and that's something I kind of want to touch on, because you feel like that is a weakness for Fortnite in terms of like the pro players being young and kind of reckless and out there, let's say with their brands and things of that nature.
Um, it is and isn't, right? Because I think they harbor these audiences, like clicks, for example, right? is a polarizing figure. Speed, a
Mm.
polarizing figure. Aiden Ross, polarizing figure.
Yeah.
And their audience is primarily young, right?
Mm.
And while I'm not saying they're necessarily the best influences in the world for young audiences, they draw those presence because when you tune in, it is just these outgoing, insane, crazy personalities that people are just innately drawn to, right?
Mm.
Now, that's the good side for them, right? Because
Yeah.
that transcends Fortnite as a game. But when it comes to like the competitive scene specifically, and I've literally had these conversations with sponsors that want to drop hundreds of thousands of dollars into an event, right?
Yeah.
Between production costs, pricing, etc. And then they're like, okay, like who are your biggest draws? And I have to link them clicks,
Yeah.
uh, and some of these other guys. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I can reach out to these guys and potentially get them in the game. And they're like, yeah, this is too much of a risk for us. We're just
Yeah.
going to use the marketing dollars elsewhere.
Yeah.
Because what people don't realize is like these big corporations have millions of dollars in marketing spend every year.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
more and more in recent years, they've been trying to go to esports to do that,
Mhm.
but it's too big of a risk. And I think
Yeah.
that's like part of the reason we've actually seen Fortnite pull back in their communication over the years
Mm.
is because look at their partnership levels, like Disney, for example.
Yeah. Yeah.
Personally,
Yeah.
I used to work at Disney. I worked there
Mm.
for 5 years, and I've seen the in and outs of that business, and I
Yeah.
know how hard it is to get a partnership with Disney. It is not easy at all. So for Fortnite to be able to break down that barrier and make that possible,
Yeah.
they have to be cautious to protect that asset because that is a big business asset. Because at the end of
Mhm.
the day, more than anything, Fortnite is a business, right?
Yeah. Right. Right.
Um, and it's funny because like people are like, oh, like these partnerships ruin the game. Like, no, these partnerships kept the game alive in
Yeah.
a lot of ways,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and like it's kept it like people like are very close minded to what they see in the pros talk about
Mm.
when it comes to social media at least, and some of the creators. But realistically, the game transcends all of them. Like it is so much bigger
Yeah.
than any level of creators that we have. And in most recent days, we've obviously seen creator boosts in numbers, but it is so much bigger than the impact that they have. So sometimes we're so closed into our circle, we only think one thing because as a community we see one thing.
Mm.
But in reality, it's just so big, right? And
Yeah.
so when it comes to protecting what Fortnite has built, they find that finite line of like, can we communicate here, but it doesn't risk like causing
Yeah.
outrage in a way that
Right.
could affect this relationship here. And it's super smart of them. And realistically, at the end of the day, like I said before, Fortnite is a business. And this is one of the biggest facts that people miss more often than not is that Fortnite is there to produce money and build an ecosystem of things to support a larger player base, larger and larger, and grow bigger than any game has ever done, right?
Mhm.
And that's what their focus is right now. With that being said, there is a high cost to producing what they do. We saw the layoffs not too long ago,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and that was 860 employees, I want to say. And they said that was like 20%, like less than 20% of their employee base. So take this with a grain of salt because obviously I don't know all salary numbers, like, or I don't know salary numbers like that. But a majority of those people were probably making in the like 80 to 100K range. So that's close to like 80, 90 million dollars in salaries alone, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Not including the incredible benefits that like Epic has. Like they do like unlimited vacation and some of these other crazy
Wow.
stuff. Like it's
Okay.
actually insane what they do for their employees, but that's aside the point. Um, their overhead cost for employees is very, very high.
Yeah.
So yes, let's say they made up like billions of dollars, right? Let's say they made $4 billion on Fortnite. Like the cost to produce Fortnite is not cheap,
Yeah. Yeah.
and to continue to grow Fortnite in the way that they're trying to is not cheap. So at the end of the day, yes, we are getting $10 million versus $100 million 5 years ago for our major Fortnite event. But realistically, what other game, what other title is putting that type of money in the hands of the people, not just a select few who can compete, right? No one.
Yeah. 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 Well, because
Sure.
that's something too that I've seen them put more of an emphasis on is the removals of barriers to entry in the competitive scene, and it's
Yep.
always been that. I mean, you don't have to. I mean, like with Valorant is a great comparison for this. You have to be signed to a pro team to compete in any Valorant circuit, even the lower brackets, before you even really start making money, or where you can make a living off of it. If you want to be any tier of pro, you have to be signed to some kind of team, and that is a lengthy process. You are competing with so many other people, whereas Fortnite, you can load up a solo victory cup any night of the week on your home PC. You don't have to be signed anywhere. You don't, and you can compete at the same level. You can be in pro lobbies. You can be, so that you can become an overnight pro in a way that can't really be touched by many other games. There isn't a barrier to entry in that sense. And I've seen this. That was something that another thing that I cited with ranked, and just kind of everything that they've done with that. They're trying to make that transition, and I think that's why they've made ranked the way it is, with the no siphon and with the loot pool consistency. Is they're trying to make it the easiest it's ever been to transition into competitive for these players that didn't necessarily have an interest before, which is a good thing at the end of the day. I mean, yes, I want Siphon back. I'd rather them put Siphon in both pubs and ranked, if they want to keep that consistency. But I think Siphon is just a better system overall, and I think the general consensus agrees with that. That kind of, I guess, leads me into thinking about, they want to make it easier than it's ever been to transition into competitive. A zero build FNCS. Do you think that would be a good idea? Do you think that it's ever coming?
No, it'll never exist. So, and this is another harp that I have on the scene. But the zero build scene exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fraction of the standard BR scene, if we're being
100%.
honest, right?
Oh, 100%.
But the zero build scene exists in the third party world, right? And that's where it exists. So when I see complaints of like pros talking about, oh, like, why is this, like, I would be there, like, or this is stupid, right? I don't care if like they're saying like, oh, I would be there if it was builds, but like it's zero builds, so I'm not going, right? Like, that's fine. Go ahead and say that.
Yeah.
But when you're like just degrading an organization for putting on a zero build event because it's not standard BR, like, that's a problem. And you have to remember, these organizations, especially ones that are putting up $25,000 or more in prizing, they have to get approval.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, one of those things that people don't realize, like, because they don't necessarily broadcast it all the time, is like these events, more often than not, are like supported by Epic, even financially in some ways. And like people don't like remember the DreamHack Opens that we used to have online?
Yeah.
I don't know this for fact, right? But from what I could tell online is that these were funded events via Epic. Like Epic would like give DreamHack the money to host them.
Yeah.
Right. And so people were like, oh, I love the DreamHack events, but like I hate cash cups. And it's like,
they're the same people. Yeah.
But yes, it's like, and it's just that's kind of one of those things. And so when it comes to the third party scene and zero build, which is the kind of the focus of this topic, like a lot of the funds, not Gamers 8, to be clear, like G and all that stuff is just they fund all that stuff themselves.
Yeah.
But there's like a lot of other events like throughout the scene that I'm pretty positive. Again, Epic has not told me these things. I don't know these for fact, but from what I can tell from the conversations that I've had with people outside of Epic and other stuff, like it seems like Epic takes the money for at least the prizing for a lot of these events and hands it to these companies, and they're saying, hey, there's a lot more hurdles for us to host an event. Just go do it. And here you go. Like, so it's something to keep in mind. Like, so the other piece of that is like, because they don't have an official track for zero build, they want the third party scene to be more zero build focused, right? Because guess what? If they can't build that scene anywhere else on an official track, because they know the response that they'll get. So because and to be honest, FNCS is meant to be a true pure competitive 100%. Event, and zero build is not innately competitive because there's way too much RNG and chaos in it. Obviously, there are strategies. We saw Cammy do it at G8,
Yeah.
where you can win,
Yeah.
right? And you can strategize and be prepared for that stuff. But it's not as technically skilled
Yeah.
as the standard BR is. And I don't genuinely on the market right now, I don't think there's a single esport that requires the technical skill that Fortnite does.
Oh,
Like,
agreed, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, when you take the culmination of, because I've talked about this a lot when people say, oh, you know, CS:GO is a more pure esport or whatever, fill in the blank. I'm going, but in Fortnite you have all of the same factors plus the single most complicated mechanics that have ever been included in just any game, not just a shooter. I mean, so to think that you have, you know, these unbelievably complex mechanics with trillions of unique permutations that you could create between the 4 builds and all of the edits for each of them, you know, there's no mastery of that. Like, we will never, we keep pushing the skill ceiling and keep pushing it, and we see these like crazy things. I see a clip, you know, every couple weeks where I'm like, what did he just do? How did he do that? Like, you know, like new stuff, new moves are being invented. You know, like I was watching a documentary on like Myth and his career, and I was watching like his best building, you know, back in like season 0 or like season 1 or whatever. And I'm going like, this is literally like toddler level compared to what people are doing in a basic game now. Like the average ranked player, you know, would seem like an alien to these guys back in the day. And
100%.
well, and to be fair to Myth in that situation, building back then without turbo build,
oh, for sure,
was so difficult.
No, it's not to discredit him, but it's
no,
to say how far we've pushed that, and really it has seemingly limitless potential beyond that. I mean, there's still stuff coming out that's just like, wow, this is insane. And to put that amount of control over a situation, and near infinite paths of decision making in a shooter of all things, I mean, it's so unique in that sense. And I think that's whenever I talk to somebody who's into the competitive scene, this is the sentiment that I receive, is that you've never had this level of control in a shooter. If you play the game perfectly, nothing is up to chance. And that is just like, that's a weird thing to think. Because like in any other shooter, you can have as much control over a situation until somebody walks through a doorway and you have a 50-50 and it's all just an aim fight. And it's like, that is a skill. But in Fortnite, you have so much control. I mean, you know, somebody who plays the game perfectly can hit their opponent and not be hit at all. And that's just like an insane thing to think about because you've never had that before. So yeah, I mean, you have all the factors. You have aim, you have game sense, you have, you know, positioning and all of that stuff. Then you add the elements of a BR on top of that, you know, you have to be aware of rotations and map conservation and all of this stuff to plan your rotations and get in good positions in the map. And then you also have building and editing, which those two alone you'll never fully master. It is by far, I think, the most technical game out there, and it takes the most to master. And I think anybody who has that competitive drive of, I want to be the best at this, I want to continue getting better at it, that's why it's become kind of an addiction for people, is because we haven't touched the end of it. We haven't reached the skill ceiling. I mean, you talk about CS:GO, there aren't many more places it can go. You know, they've been doing the same executions on the same sites for 5-10 years, you know, and it's just who wins that aim battle at the end of the day. Like, there's a lot of minute factors and utility usage, but there aren't as many layers to it. Fortnite is such a dimensional game in how many ways you can play it, and what can go wrong and what can go right. Yeah, it's something that I love to talk about because I think people overlook that fact that you have all of the factors that you're comparing that esport to, plus, you know, these mechanics that nobody has ever duplicated or done anything similar to.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I think when you look at esports as a whole, it's really nice to be able to watch a CS:GO match and be able to have the buy-in of the teams and things like that. Sadly, it's not something that's ever possible in Fortnite, but for the greater good of the competitive scene, if that makes sense, right? Because if they were, let's say they were to support orgs, let's say, because that's a topic that has come up quite a bit, and they're like, oh, we've decided we want to support organizations. The best way to do that is now close the competitive track and only allow for certain organizations to compete.
Yeah.
That would be it. And like, realistically, that would suck.
Yeah.
or kill competitive integrity.
Oh
Exactly.
yeah.
It would kill a lot of things for Fortnite. And so at the end of the day, like I always see these like random topics that come up, and I'm fortunate enough to have lived a life before I was in gaming
Mm,
that was in the corporate world. Like,
mm,
so I'm very much versed in business,
yeah.
and so I can look at a move and see why they did that move, or at least have good indication as to why they made that move, right?
Yeah. Sure.
Like you said with ranked in pubs, right? The
Hmm.
conversation of like, why is this the same, right? There's two reasons in my head. Number one is what you said. They want the easiest conversion track from pubs to ranked that they've ever had, because guess what? Every other game has that.
Yeah.
But if you innately take away what makes Fortnite, i.e., junk rifts and shockwaves and all these other like really chaotic items in the game, you then take away the core of Fortnite. And we saw that with competitive competitive viewership and interest had hit an all-time low
Mm,
when it was super like competitive, which I get, right? There
yeah.
is a conversation to have both, right?
Yeah.
The very very competitive Fortnite versus like the more chaotic true to nature Fortnite. But when you look at like the way that the viewer perceives it and the average consumer perceives it,
Mm,
they enjoy the chaotic version. And I think part of the reason is they think that that's what they play, so it's easier for them to
yeah.
understand, right?
Yeah.
And I think Fortnite also realizes that from a viewership standpoint, when you're broadcasting something, you want it to be as digestible as possible
Yeah.
for a casual player.
That was why I brought
Wh-
up the zero build FNCS idea, because and
Mhm.
that's why the third party, like Gamers 8, have decided to make their tournaments zero build. In my head, is because it's so much easier to understand. It like when you're watching that, it is easier to go, oh yeah, I know what's going on here, as opposed to like builds and edits where I like, for example, I show my mom like clips sometimes of like what these kids are capable of, and she goes, I don't even know how kids think that fast. I have no idea what he just did, but I know I couldn't do it. And like that, and that, that's kind of someone who, is just starting the game or whatever, who hasn't really delved into those mechanics yet, is going to feel the same way. They're going to feel extremely overwhelmed, and they're just going to go, I have no clue what he just did. I don't know why people are reacting the way they just did to the way that guy killed that guy. I don't know how technically amazing that was. And I think that's kind of the same reasoning, when you get into what you were talking about. But
No, I think at the end of the day, Fortnite it makes decisions based off what they think are best for the business. Will they always
yeah,
be the best decisions? I'm going to be honest, no, right?
yeah,
Right.
But no company is going to be perfect in their execution of things. I mean, like we could be so unlucky as to have Activision as the devs, and
yeah,
to be honest, and like
yeah,
they care zero, and
yeah,
it sucks for a community. I have friends that like I played COD growing up, and
yeah.
I have friends that are still very diehard COD, and they always it's the month before release, and I always have this conversation with them. They're like, I know it. This one is going to be the best one, and I just like I have that. Oh, buddy, my
Ninja,
guy.
that ninja clip that went viral, I think was really funny when he was playing with Cloaksy on OG
Mhm.
Fortnite, and they were talking about Cloaksy was like, "This is gonna be the one," and Ninja's like, "Dude, you are trapped in this cycle. They say that every year. This is gonna be the one. This is good. They've made all the necessary changes, and then." A month in, they're like, "Ah, it flopped. It's so bad. COD is so bad. Why can they never get it right?" And it's just this
Well,
endless
and what
cycle.
makes it worse is they put it behind a $70 paywall.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
could you imagine
If
like
every new Fortnite season was like
was
$50.
70
Yeah.
bucks, like 50 bucks,
Yeah.
like or even just every year you have to
Yeah.
pay
Every
like a
chapter.
50
Yeah. Yeah.
every chapter is a new $50 to enter into Fortnite. Like
Oh, that'd kill it. It'd kill it so fast. It's unbelievable. It would die
and
overnight.
and it's what's worse is like for Activision, that's just not the business model anymore.
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
realistically, like
Yeah.
pay for a campaign, charge 40 bucks for a campaign, right?
Hmm.
I strongly believe if you make a cool enough campaign, absolutely charge for it.
Yeah.
And then multiplayer and Warzone should be free, and heavily lean into the content around it, i.e., skins and
Yeah.
gun wraps and all these different
Which you've
things.
seen
Like
them
they're
take
operators.
pages out of Fortnite's book now with these crazy celebrity collabs and the boys collab that they did. Very much, like, oh, we saw that Fortnite's seen success here. We're going to replicate that. Yeah.
Well, and here's the problem with that, though, for them. I am more likely to spend money on a game that was free than I would spend
Mhm.
more money on a game that I paid $70 for. Because
For sure.
$70 is like for a lot of people, $70 is a lot of money
Yeah.
to drop on a game, and then go in and spend another $20 on an operator or
Mhm.
$10 on like a camo. I don't
Yeah.
fully know how their systems work. I have like a broad understanding because I used to play it quite a bit, but it's
Yeah.
like it's just unfortunate that even Activision doesn't see what is clearly in
Mm.
front of them, and that is like this $70 every year model does not work. And
Yeah.
so I'm hoping
Yeah.
with Microsoft's acquisition,
Yeah.
it will improve some things. Like we'll see, because if a lot of people are still in executive positions that were in executive positions before at Activision, I don't know that I see much of a difference coming for that community, but
Mm.
I really hope so. For the sake of that game, they just reported that this is like the all-time lowest they've seen COD player base. It was
Oh,
some kind
wow.
of crazy stat. Like they're showing just a massive decline
Mm.
in consumer trust, right?
Yeah.
And COD has gone on to be like a more adult game. I think most like older players, older gamers are the ones that are still kind of bought into COD, but they're
Yep.
failing to get the new audience
Yeah.
because the younger audience is more into something that is more accessible to them. Right? They
Yeah.
don't have to beg their parents for $70 to purchase
Yeah.
a game.
Yeah. Right.
No, they can just ask their parents for $10 here and there on for V-Bucks
Yeah.
throughout the
Yeah.
year.
Yeah. Right. Right.
So
Well, and that's the thing, right? It's I'm saving that $70, and then I can buy 7, packs of V-Bucks or whatever, right? So you feel like you're getting more bang for your buck, and you are. I mean, even if let's say you got a base set of skins with a $70 release, that perceived savings or those whatever, like, and like you said, that paywall of not having to drop 70 at one time, which is insane. I mean, even going back to the days of like $50-$60 games, like that was rough for me as a kid. I was like, man, I get one game like a month, maybe, like a new game that I can experience. So yeah, that model is certainly more accessible, and I think it's become the norm now. So it's like you have to compete. That's what business is.
yeah.
So I want to kind of transition, because what you are is a caster. That is that your, you would identify that's your full-time career, or what would you call yourself?
Yes.
I don't want to.
So
Yeah.
it's such a weird term. On-air talent is like technically what we
Okay.
are, because we can
Right.
do multiple things, right? You can be an
Yeah.
analyst, you can be a caster, commentator, host,
Mhm.
and so I do all of the above, right?
Yeah.
I also
Yeah.
do like voice acting, and I have like a business on the back end that I'm building, and that's like I've
Oh,
mostly done it
awesome.
as me, but now it's
Yeah.
actually a business. It's going to be a business entity, which more on that next year.
Okay.
But
Nice.
Sounds good.
it's for me, that's at the core of who I am, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like I love what I do. I love being able to travel and talk about video games for a living. Like
Yeah.
when I talk to a casual person like that is like, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" It always is, I talk about video games for a living and I
Mhm.
travel the world doing it. Because if you just say like, "Oh, I talk about video games for a living," they're going to be like, "Okay, like what's your real job?"
Yeah. So you live in your
And,
mom's basement
Yeah.
making nothing.
Ye-
Yeah. Yeah.
so I always include that I travel and I get to travel the world to do it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they know in their heads innately traveling the world is not cheap, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So being sent to Saudi Arabia, Denmark,
Yeah.
Sweden, all these other places, like all I have to say is that, and then it clicks that like, oh man, actually this might actually be a career. He's not in his mom's basement.
You ain't
Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You ain't kidding.
So how did that? Because you said you were in the corporate world for a time.
mhm.
How did that like passion kind of start for you? How did you transition into the esports scene and career?
So I've been a gamer my entire life, right? I've always leaned into video games as an escape from work, And so I'm very much like when I am focused on something, a work project or a career path, whatever it is, I'm committed 110%. And
Mm,
so when I was growing up, my uncle was a COO and CEO, and I saw the lifestyle that he lived, right?
mm,
Mm.
And I was like, I want that, more security than anything. Because I grew up with nothing, right? Like I grew
mm,
up with very little in my life. And so I was like, I want that. I see what he does. I'm going to be this, right? And so what I did was I joined originally it was public supermarkets, and I climbed up the ladder quite quickly
mm,
and then left to go to Disney, started over again
mm.
Mhm.
because of at the time a breakup, believe it or not.
Oh wow.
And so the breakup restarted me. I was a part-time lifeguard when I started at Disney.
Wow.
Ooh.
And I worked up to front desk, like rec manager at one point, front desk manager at one point. I
Mm,
did a little bit of traveling and doing training management and stuff
Right.
with Disney, and that's where I transcended over to Marriott, and I was an assistant general manager of a hotel.
oh wow.
And then from there, I went into corporate real estate in New York, where I
Mm,
Right.
was a director of training and development. And then I did the same thing. I did that again in New York. But while all of this was happening, from the the days of, I want to say it was when I was started at Marriott is when Fortnite,
mm,
like, or towards the end of my Marriott time was when Fortnite was starting to boom, and I was addicted, right?
mm.
So I
Right.
found myself like scheduling myself in a way to leave to be home with the boys to play Fortnite.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Nice.
And so I was addicted, like
Yeah.
hooked.
Yeah.
And it got me in trouble once, I can't lie. But I loved Fortnite. So I started doing this stuff, and COVID hits, the world shuts down, and I'm working from home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And before that, I had streamed a few times during Fortnite's peak, and it was solely so that my wife at in Florida could watch me play when I was in New Jersey, because I
Mm,
had
Mm.
moved up for work when I had
Right.
made that transition from Marriott to corporate. And
mm,
so she didn't make the immediate move with me because she had to take care of a few things for, like, it was like a month and a half, 2 months. And so
mm.
during that time, I started streaming. I picked up an audience quick, and because I had taken my first corporate job and I was making an just a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do with it. I started giving away things. So I would literally like random people in my chat would get a PC, or like
Damn.
accessories. Like literally it was
Damn.
cool because I was like in a position where I could just give back, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I grew like a bit of an audience, and then work consumed me again. So I had to take a step back. So I couldn't do it.
Mm,
And so like 6 months went by, I streamed again, whatever. And then now we get back to the COVID piece. COVID shuts the world down. I'm working from home. I'm like, you know what? This is super easy. I can wake up 7 to 5 and work from home, and then 6 to 10 stream, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I decided to do it, and something felt different like this time streaming. And I was like, let me take it a little more serious. Let me
Mm,
start like building more of a social presence. Let me focus on like working with an editor, maybe producing some content, doing some of that stuff.
mm,
And one thing led to another, and Monster D Face found my stream,
mm.
Ooh.
and I was actually doing I was watching his VOD reviews from back in the day live on my stream, and I was
Yeah.
breaking
Oh.
down like comparison thoughts to his VOD reviews, right? So he sat in
Mm,
the chat with me while I watched his entire video,
yeah.
and then he followed me on Twitter, and we started to talk a little bit, and started to get just have some base conversations about things.
Yeah.
And then I was in his chat one day, and somebody asked in his chat, they're like, "Well, where's the Fortnite podcast? Like, what happened?" And Monster goes, "Oh, I need a co-host, like a good, solid co-host
Mm,
that can be present, because I just haven't been able to find one to kind of fill that void." And
Right.
somebody in his chat, not even me, because I wasn't going to say anything, right?
sure.
At least not in chat.
Didn't want to invite
Somebody in his
yourself. Yeah.
chat,
Yeah.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
like, "What about Panda?"
Mm,
Because I was in there so actively, right?
yeah.
Right.
And he was like, "I would give Panda a shot. Let's put him on the next, like, we'll film an episode next week." So literally he gave me like like one shot to, like, it was like an episode about me from
Mm,
his POV, right? And it
Right.
was the Fortnite podcast. And he's like, after that episode, I didn't hear anything immediately. A few days go by, and he's like, "All right, I'll see you on Wednesdays." So
nice.
I started
And
doing the podcast with him.
yeah.
And like, if you know anything about the Fortnite podcast, it's the like just based on numbers alone is the
Mhm.
number one in the space, right?
Yeah.
And it's not that we really have many podcasts or anything in the space, but it's like we do like $2,000 to $5,000 or $5,000, 5,000 downloads an
Yeah.
episode,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is pretty significant when we're audio only. There's no video to it. It's
Mhm.
just on like the Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we do actually pretty well. Um, but we've never done it in a way that we want the podcast to be like this big thing, right?
Mm.
We've always done it in the way that there's a really diehard community behind the Fortnite podcast, and we've never like overly promoted it, done anything like that. We're more just speaking to them
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
like
Right.
really cool
Right.
conversations with them
Yeah.
because our DMs will fill up after an episode and they'll be like, dude, I thought the same thing, or like, oh, I think this is kind of different. I don't know that I
Mm.
agree with your take, which is good. Like at the end
Yeah.
of the day, conversations are everything, right?
Yeah.
Like we need to
100%.
like we have to like if we have different point of view, great, because that's a
Yeah.
conversation to have.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And like I that's why I started making the videos I did
Yeah.
with the sit down videos is
Yeah.
because
I
had
have that
these
on my
like
on
these
my, I have that on my topic list. Don't worry. We're gonna get to that.
we'll
But
talk about it, but it's like it's one of those things that it's like conversations are so important, and the more that people have different opinions, the more that people can shape their own opinions as well, like influential figures is the way
you're
I say
preaching to the choir. So I'm a philosophy major. That's what I'm in school
Sick.
for. And that was kind of my whole thing getting into content creation. At somewhat similar story to you. I was graduating high school 2020 when COVID hit. So my last 3-4 months of my senior year were just cut off, and I was just so bored doing nothing. Like I was just sitting there like I have absolutely nothing to do. And I played games throughout my childhood, but I was never like a diehard gamer. I'd never like spent hours and hours on a shooter. Like I was like a Nintendo kid, like Smash Bros, like that type of stuff growing up. But I started streaming because I was like, I've been in musical theater. I was an actor, singer, dancer. Like I've been on cameras before. I've recorded stuff before. So yeah, I'll just hop on, this streaming thing and see, because I was watching them all day. I was sitting and watching Tim the Tatman and Ninja and all that.
Yeah.
And I was like, let me give it a try because my big thing, I was also a youth pastor for 3 years, and my big thing was like, I saw the kids of that next generation, and like to your point earlier about who they were watching and the influences, and I was seeing the direct fruits of these influences. I was seeing these kids who watch the Clixes and the Buckies, especially back in that day, right? When Clix is
Yeah.
15, 16, and he really hadn't. Because I think now, to his credit, I think he's matured. He's doing some really cool stuff.
100%.
I'd like to see his growth, and I think he's taking more seriously now, because that was a big thing that I had with Click specifically, was I think he's taking more seriously the responsibility he has as a role model now. I think he's beginning to see that
100%.
and understand that, and so kudos to him on that. But I was seeing this lack of them in the space, and there are good role models, but a lot of them I just thought weren't really appealing to that teenage, the 13 to 17 range of boys specifically. Like really, what kid under, or over 13 is going to be watching like Nick A30, for example? I love what he does, and I respect that he's fully family friendly, all of that stuff, but I don't think that
Yeah.
he's going to appeal to that audience. He just, like kids who are 14, 15, 16, they're going to be watching the Buckies and the Clixes. And I was kind of like, I want to strike that balance between, that entertainment and that role model. And a big thing for me was those conversations, is bringing intellectualism into the space, because you see so many people who just listen to their favorite creator and they become an echo chamber, or they,
Yep.
or politically or religiously or any of that stuff, just kind of these people who are so myopic in their life, and they really just don't even have any of their own opinions. They just take from someone who is more popular or more clouded or in a position that they want to be in, and they go, okay, this is what I have to do. And I think especially with the gaming scene and the esports scene, they look at a Clix and they go, oh, he has the success that I want, so I'm going to emulate everything that he does. And they don't have the consciousness to separate, oh, it's because he practices and because he does these things, not because he's rambunctious or says the things that he does or believes the things that he does. They can't separate that in their head. So they're like, I don't know what exactly it is. I can't pinpoint it, so I'm just going to emulate all of it. So that was a big thing for me too, was trying to bring that intellectualism, how to disagree, how to have debate and conversation that is productive when we disagree. That's when it's most valuable. Like, great, I can have an insightful conversation with somebody who agrees with me, but we're going to be saying mostly the same things. It's, someone who arrived at a conclusion that I respect, and this, in the philosophy scene, this is a big thing. Like, I have greater respect for people who disagree with me for the right reasons than people who agree with me for the wrong reasons. And that, so that was a big thing, I think, in this scene, and that's still a goal that I try to harbor as much of that as possible, and I try to incorporate real life stuff into like my streams or my content or whatever. And that was a big thing behind this podcast, was getting to see this deeper side of creators and figures in the scene, to give these kids in this audience like that, to go, oh wow, like there's more than just the caster, or there's more than just the streamer, and kind of starting to have the seeds to have those conversations later on.
Yeah, and those conversations are important. And shout out to you. I worked in youth ministry as well for years. I was part of the band and did some ministry myself. So
that's awesome.
Definitely makes an impact, for sure. But when you talk about the influence, right? It's very similar to the start of my story, where I saw the life that my uncle lived at a very young age, and I knew that was what I wanted, right? And so I was fortunate enough that he was a good role model, right? Like, he was just a through and through very good person, and like, he had found success, but it never like tore at who he was as an individual. And so I had a really good person to look up to. But when Bucky is young and Clicks are young, right? You also can't fully fault them for their behavior. I can go back now and be like, Bucky, okay, I think it's time to start maturing a little bit. Like, look at what Clicks has done. Realistically, Bucky as a personality could be right here, if not above Clicks, had he taken the necessary steps to mature and build a proper brand. But he probably doesn't have the right people around him, or maybe he just doesn't have the maturity level to change. But like, even look at his actions at Global. The man gets sent home for the biggest in-person event that he qualified through the skin of his teeth.
A miracle qualification. I mean, it was, everyone was shocked.
And throws it away because of his behavior. And of course he'll go online and try to paint a narrative that it was like, oh, I don't know why I got thrown out. Bruh, we all saw the streams, dude. Like,
right.
It's not like you didn't do it publicly.
Well, and sorry, I mean, it's kind of a, not a boy who cried wolf thing, but it's like your reputation kind of precedes you. Like, are they really going to be likely to believe you if you have shown this character consistently in the past, and this is what you've built for yourself online in terms of branding, and you've done nothing up to the event to show any indication that there's any difference? So then when they do, like, if it was a lot of other players, they may go, oh, maybe we're wrong, or, they may have some more lenience there. But it's like, you are a repeat offender, and, Epic as a company and competitive is aware that, man, we have these role models for kids out there, and we don't want to advertise the wrong message. We don't want to send look up to this guy. So they do have to be, because Bucky has shown that consistently to be the character that he plays on stream. I don't, I can't speak much to him off stream. I've only met him a couple times. But this is what you presented to your audience and online. Yeah, we can't just be lenient with you, because it communicates like that we tolerate this, especially with someone where this is not their first time, or this was just a, lapse in judgment, or whatever that, the political wording for it is. So, I mean, it does, it speaks to that very thing. And I think that's, we've seen that with a lot of pros, and I, like you were saying, I think, having the right people around you, the biggest thing that I've noticed, and I've talked about this a few times, is like parent support, and then having some kind of manager or somebody who is older and understands the space and understands branding and brand consistency. Like Feldy is the backbone of everything that Clicks is doing. Like, shout out to Feldman, because he's like, you can tell that their relationship is really good, and that Clicks trusts him, and that Feldy is guiding him in these right directions. And I think that's a lot of the reason why Clicks has matured the way that he has. You look at Booga. I mean, Booga, his parents really involved, great role models, and they got him management that also, seeks to understand those things. And Booga has had a pretty spotless career in that sense because he's had people that had those truths without having to learn them the hard way, right? And I think that's the big thing in the scene is like, and Cooper's parents, his manager C Mills, like he has people around him now too that are like when Cooper and Cooper has made some mistakes. He's had some slip ups and he's said some things that he regrets. But I know his parents. I had the pleasure of working alongside them and working with Cooper when I was on PL. And like they keep him in check. Like, when those events happen, like they reached out to all the PL ownership and they're like, hey, we don't condone this. We're going to fix this on our end with him. We want him to be a good role model. We want him to, be a good person first and foremost. And just to see the difference that's made in his career now that he had his opportunity and is making the most of it and is becoming like a role model for all these kids. I mean, he wouldn't be averaging what he is. He wouldn't be, maintaining the momentum that he had if he was just another, Timmy that got his opportunity. He's had those older, wiser voices in his ear that have guided him now to take that opportunity and make the most of it and make something that's long lasting. Now his career is pretty set in stone, especially if he continues to elevate. And that's the biggest difference that I've seen. And that's something that I think that like orgs, for example, the org culture is something that I'm very interested in. That I think there's a lack of. I think there's a lack of role models and mentors in the space and in the org scene specifically, and that was something that I tried to take advantage of when I was in, a managerial position in orgs, was like, I like being that mentor. And it really felt like being a youth pastor again, because I'm managing these kids and I'm getting to speak into their lives and just provide a little bit. I mean, even that couple years of difference, I can provide a little bit of wisdom where I can say, hey, this might not be the smartest decision. Like, let's think about the long-term consequences of what you may be doing. And those things, it makes a massive difference in this scene.
Oh man, there's so many things I could say about orgs right now, and look, I love it. But the one thing I am going to say to that point is Elite. I love Elite to death. I love Aaron to death, who's the owner of Elite.
Yeah.
Lots of great people in that. But their social media sometimes has me like, you're an organization. You're looking to bring sponsors and brands.
Yeah.
Who will then give you money to support what you're trying to build as an org, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you don't speak in a way that allows brands to comfortably come to you and be like, I'm Razer. I'm going to give you controllers or keyboards or whatever else to support and $10,000, right? Like a year or 6 months, whatever it is. Like these companies have money, and they're not like, it's not like they're not willing to give it to these orgs, right?
Yeah.
Or give it to individuals. I've seen Razer partnerships and some of these other partnerships happen for creators that are like averaging 20 viewers on Twitch, like and have like 2,000 followers on Twitter and maybe like a couple thousand on TikTok. Like it's not that they're like, these brands are not willing to work with them, work with like smaller creators and work with orgs and things like that.
Yeah.
You just have to be, number one, the right attitude, and you have to go after it.
Yeah.
And I don't think the orgs have what most businesses have, which is like business development people.
Yeah.
That they call it partnership managers, but I don't know like what they actually do. Because if I was a partnership manager, I could reach out to 100 different companies in a day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
And I guarantee you, I probably get 10 of those to convert into a partnership throughout the year. And that's one day's work. So what are you doing the other 364 days, right?
Yeah. Right.
So there's a lot of conversations I could have about orgs. Maybe that'll be a topic I make a video about soon.
Yeah. No, I mean, definitely do it. Cause that's something that we talk about a lot, because both of us have experience in that. And that was something that like, especially in PL, I can say that those conversations were happening, and we were about to restructure into this whole different, like, wait, why haven't people been doing this? Like, we really were just like, wait, this is like way more simple than people make it out to be. And I think the biggest issue is this, it's not even symbiosis, because it's not benefiting either one fully, but the attitude of pros in how they approach orgs, especially in this space, is just as a paycheck. And they don't really like, they think that like, oh, my presence on the org, me, advertising your org's name is enough for this, this payment per month. It's going to pay my rent. And there's a lack of equilibrium there in terms of benefit. I mean, every business partnership should be mutually beneficial. That should be the goal every time.
Yeah.
And it's like predatory from both sides. Like the org's like, oh, what's the lowest amount that we can get him for so that he can, advertise for us and be in our videos. And then the pro is thinking, oh, what, how much money can I suck out of these guys while doing like the least amount of work possible? And it's just this like very selfish and greedy attitude towards business and towards the space. And I think that is what is part of what has contributed to specifically Fortnite org culture, to making it so just inhospitable. I mean, you see these orgs that pop up for 6 months and then they die. And you have a couple of cases that are maintaining that. I think Zen is a great example of someone who's kind of innovating how we view that, because really they're more of an agency. They're connecting, their brand partnerships to their creators that they have signed. There isn't, there's not a payment going back and forth. There's, that it's just, and I think the biggest thing, and kind of to your point, like with Elite, with an org, you have to build your own brand. You treat it like its own content creator. You have to build your own brand. You have to build your own, presences on different social medias. Treat the org entity as if it was one content creator. And when you start visualizing it like that, everything kind of falls into line in terms of, business development, like how you start to think about it. Because that's all it is you are a content creator. Now, like, just think of it as having a channel with multiple stars, or however you want to, visualize that to execute that. But yeah, no, I definitely would love to see a video out of you, with your unique, view and kind of your backside view, on the org scene. Cause we've definitely talked about it a lot. And kind of speaking of your unique view, as a caster, how do you think your view of competitive is different? Do you think you have more insight into like overarching long-term goals? Do you think that you view like the state of competitive differently than the average competitive person?
I think I do, and I don't want to say it's because I'm solely a caster, right? Because obviously there is more insight being a caster and watching it from the outside looking in versus being in it, right? Because when you're in it, you're jaded. Because if something doesn't go your way, you're innately negative about it, right? Like, and it takes a special person not to be negative all the time, right? When you're dealing with stuff. And unfortunately, it's what a majority of the pro scene is. Like, they could like, I'm telling you right now, they could put Siphon and split the loot pools again, and then the conversation would then focus to server performance. They could fix the servers, and the conversation would focus over here. Like, no matter what, there will always be something that will cause uproar,
especially in gaming, like, because of the you can you can hide behind the screen and you can say whatever you want, and there's no perceived consequences to you. So I can harp on Epic all day long. I can make content out of it. I can make it my entire brand is I hate Epic Games and they're terrible, and you can just
shout out Boop.
but I mean, the protection and the anonymity, that's a big thing in this industry, because people just say whatever they want and they feel like there's no consequences to it.
I think when you're young, there's like some kind of leniency to it because you see a lot of people doing it, right? But when you become an adult, there has to be, like, when you are an adult and you've matured along quite a bit, and you're still doing that, it's one of two reasons, right? Number one, which I think this is what kind of falls into the category for a lot of people, is like, if you're an adult and you're still complaining, like unconstructively complaining, let me put it that way, about something, then especially a video game, then you're doing it with the intent to incite some kind of reaction, right? And I think a lot of creators in the Fortnite space that are pro side, that's why you see them negative. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It is so easy to build a brand if you're just always on the pro side. Like, and I respect Boop in a lot of ways. So shout out Boop for a lot of the things he does. And the only reason I make a joke about it is because he kind of came at me about a month ago.
Oh.
So he's always seems to be the one that like likes to pick at Panda when
Mm.
I'm an innately positive person. Like you guys have had a conversation with me. You can ask anybody that knows me personally. Um, and so like he is one of those examples of, I think even if he was to like really think something isn't too bad, it wouldn't make sense for his brand, the Boop brand,
Mm.
to be like, guys, I don't think this decision is that bad.
Yeah,
So, like, I mean, when you look at like a tweet from him, for example, uh,
pulling up the
I'm gonna
receipts.
find a good one because he and to be fair, he really does a lot of good stuff. Noble is incredible.
Yeah.
He's got the strongest practice. Like and Manu's starting to get there, but like he's got the most established practice, and of course of all of EU. He does really good at communicating, like cash cups and things like that, as like information comes out to support the comms team. But then there are sometimes, okay, here it is, getting kind of sick of warming up for a few hours and then not properly being able to play out a tournament to have fun streaming it. Fortnite OG has been an effing disaster for competitive players, just embarrassing.
Mm.
Yes, look, the tournament's getting canceled and pushed and all this other crazy stuff. Like, it's definitely insane. It shouldn't be happening, right?
Not ideal.
But like to spin it in the way he did, like that had 831 likes.
Yeah.
The tweet before it was EU truly is the test region, which is kind of negative, but more of a joke, right?
Yeah.
615. The more negative he gets into it, the more likely someone is to interact with the post. Like, and these guys are smart. Like a lot of them know that. And again, like I respect the majority of what Boop does, but when it comes to like the inciting of this exciting negative narrative, that's what a lot of creators lean on, because that's how they can grow.
It's playing the game. Yeah, I mean that's and that's something in creator culture, because I've been having this metamorphosis transitional phase, kind of just in my career and my content and all that, where I just like, the deeper I've gotten into the content creation scene and the bigger and bigger and bigger people that I've met and interacted with and been able to work with, I just see this like worsening trend of playing the game. You know, it's using people, it's being manipulative or fake, or, you know, playing a completely different character than you are off camera, or what when it's not clear. Like there are people who, you know, like it's not like a Borat situation. I mean, like people who are faking being a kind and outgoing and genuine person, you know, for the sake of the camera, or, and that's, you know, it is kind of a weird thing. There's such a delicate balance between, you know, trying to make a career out of something you're passionate about and not losing who you are, and doing that in an ethical and moral way that maintains your character. And I think most people have gotten to this place where they believe that by any means necessary, and they just kind of tell themselves that I'm going to get this any way that I need to. I'm going to do whatever I have to. And it almost starts to feel like, you know, these horror stories that we have of like politicians, you know, or like, you know, if you've ever watched like House of Cards, like all the stuff that we have about like, you know, how politics work behind the scenes or whatever, people being, you know, that's how it starts to feel, is like this like landscape of people who are just like, you can't trust anyone and everyone's out for themselves and all this stuff. And I think that's just kind of a like what you were talking about is like a symptom of that same, you know, ideology. Well, if I want to keep doing this, I have to, you know, do this stuff. And I think you see, you know, like TikTok, for example, Fortnite TikTok, when I tried to get into like the TikTok space, and like I was like, oh, I need to expand my brand, and like try to make content that I was passionate about and I felt like was worth making and sharing, did terrible. And so I started studying, you know, like all these guys who are really successful in the Fortnite content scene, and it's either very shallow tips and tricks or just straight up lies. Guys will like make stuff up just to get the impressions and the views and whatever. And it's like, it just feels wrong to me. It feels like you know your audience and you know how to manipulate them, and you just have no care in the world because you're getting the money from it. You need to pay rent, whatever. So it's a hard balance to find, of like maintaining your character, you know, and not kind of getting sucked into playing the game so much because you're worried about the end results.
Well, so the nice thing for me is I don't have to play the game, right? I'm in a position that like the career that I've built for myself, I
Yeah.
don't have to play to one side or the other. What you see on socials is my genuine opinion,
Yeah.
and I'm an innately positive person, so people don't often take it as it's genuine.
Mm.
Yeah.
But like I'm also like I also don't take criticism to the timeline, right?
Mm.
I typically avoid that because it innately brings negative
Sure.
conversations, and I'm willing to have a debate with somebody when it comes to like an overall topic about something.
Sure.
But when it's just like like my thoughts on Siphon, right? I'd
Yeah.
rather put a properly like worded
Mm.
breakdown of why I think Siphon is important and send that into the right people, right?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
make those impacts in the right way
Yeah.
than putting it blindly on Twitter when those people do not exist on socials. Like
Yeah.
people are genuinely 99% of the time when they're complaining on socials, they're complaining to the ethos. It is not like
Mm.
like realistically, I'm 99% positive. Epic does not sit on Twitter
Yeah. Right.
and is
Yeah.
Right.
like
They're not
they
scrolling through.
said this, we have to do this, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
What they do is they're very reliant on like certain people in the scene and
Yeah.
interacting, and like they interact in certain ways to get feedback and like,
Mhm.
but they don't do it publicly, right? Because if you do it publicly, look at any Fortnite tweet, it's just bring back Siphon, ruin game, dead game,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so why would they interact publicly like that?
Yeah.
And again, that
Yeah.
feeds back into like protecting their brand relationships and all that stuff too. So
Right.
but you're right. There are this pursuit of attention in
Mm.
this space um, innately makes people kind when they need something and
Mm.
ruthless when they think they can get some clips or impressions or whatever else out of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
which is fine because, like, for me, for example, like if you want to come at me, cool, because I'm educated and
Mm.
I can put up an actual conversation about what you're trying to talk about, use
Yeah.
numbers, facts, and whatever you want. Whereas, like most people come at situations with just pure emotion,
Yeah.
and then that the debate is just pointless
Yeah.
because you're just sitting there saying, "Yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, but
Or
I
they take
feel
a
this
personal,
way."
like they take a personal route. You know, they try and target like
Oh
your
yeah,
looks or your whatever. And I'm like, okay, so I've
Yeah.
just won. Like you have
yeah,
no rhetoric behind what you're saying. You just, I feel this. I want to be angry at someone, and you're the lucky winner today. Like it just,
Yeah.
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 I mean, you talk about, why do you hold the opinions you hold and why do you voice them? It should be to bring about conversations or change or to say, this is why I view what I view. And I think you should too for these reasons. If you have reasons that beat my reasons, I'm open to hearing them. And I think that's another thing with social media is there's no open-mindedness. People are going in. They only want to bash their view on you louder or, more angry or whatever, instead of the genuine reason for, opinion and all of that is to get to the root of truth. And that's, people don't care about truth really nowadays. It's more about my opinion is truth. And that's how everyone seems to view the world. And like, they just kind of think, oh, truth is subjective to me. I get to decide what it is, and so they just, on social media, especially you get this idea where people feel, entitled to this idea of, oh yeah, what I say goes no matter what.
Yeah.
So you can present whatever you want. I've decided that I'm going to believe this no matter what. And it closes the door to anything productive, which is why, like, please don't respond to people on Twitter. Like it just like 99% of the time, it's just not going to produce anything. And that's what I ask myself is like, is me responding to this person, is there any chance that it's actually going to produce a conversation that is valuable? Or is it just going to make me more angry because this person is like so narrow-minded? And that, at 99% of the time I land on, no, this is not going to be productive. So you just ignore them.
And to be fair, us as human beings have a finite amount of energy in a day. Is it worth wasting a segment of that energy on a conversation that will go nowhere? No. So if I see a response like to videos or anything that I'm putting out there, and it doesn't even seem productive, I won't entertain it. But I also think the conversations are good, like Triprin. for example.
Yeah.
Phenomenal pro player in EU.
Yep.
He's responded to some of my stuff before, and we've had actual conversations
Yeah. Yeah.
that I can see some of his points, right?
Yeah.
But
Sure.
also I think he starts to see some of what I'm saying too. So
Right.
it's like it is very good to still have open dialogue, but it needs to be with the right people.
Right. Absolutely. Well, speaking of kind of the videos that you've been putting out, I've been really interested in you utilizing Twitter in I think a unique way for what a content creator usually perceives it to be, right? Because of what we talked about, Twitter is usually just this echo chamber or a diary or whatever for a lot of creators. And I was really interested when you released, your first of those couple of videos, of using Twitter as a video sharing platform, because that was kind of something that Elon's been talking about a lot, and all of that. Kind of what was the idea behind that, and kind of this is a two-parter. Do you think that because your career is stable in a different way, that your content is able to be more authentic, and you just kind of don't have to think about like numbers and stuff like that? Like, is that a relief for you?
Huge.
Yeah.
Like literally my content is just me having conversations and doing things that I'm like super interested in, right? Like this week's video, I'm filming the final pieces of it today, is about mouse pads. And it's because Cease dropped his mouse pad.
Yeah.
The 414, shout out Cease and Elevate. Actually is literally what I'm using right here at this desk. I have 2 desks that I operate from. This being obviously the casting studio, and then one downstairs where I have my more casual gaming and then editing and stuff.
Nice.
Separate from the works from this space. But when I found out what they were sending, because they sent me out one and the sleeve, which the sleeve turned out to be a little too tight for me, but it's still a pretty dope sleeve. The material is the same.
Sick.
Yeah, like it's honestly really cool product. But when they sent it to me, I was like, you know what? I was looking around my house. I have a mousepad, company mousepad underneath it, right? Down, I had the artisan pad up here, like literally, it's right there on the floor now.
Yeah.
So I had the artisan soft pad. I had an artisan glass pad before, but it just wore down too quick. And then downstairs at my setup, I had the high ground mouse pad, and then my editing station was the glorious mouse pad. So I started to think, I'm like, I have all these mouse pads anyway.
Yeah.
Like, let me just have like an open conversation. And it's not like most reviews of mouse pads are like, you can see the glide here and the best like feet, and like if you look at the spin, I'm like, it's gonna be more how I feel about it. Like, it's literally gonna be a review of me like talking about like these pads. I'm like, this looks sick. Like, it seems like it's a higher quality than some of the other pads that I've touched. Like, I feel really comfortable playing with this. Like, I feel like I have more control.
Yeah, sure.
Because that's the things that are digestible for people too, and it makes it more genuine to me, because I'm not going to know the thread count of a mouse pad. Like, I'm not going to know what it took to produce a mouse pad. What I am going to know, right, is how I feel using it.
Right.
And I think most people at home, and this is some advice for creators around, like if you want to create review content, it doesn't need to be like analytical review content. Like, you don't need to be the Linus Tech Tips of mouse pads. Like, just get the mouse pads, play with them as like a Fortnite player or like a League of Legends player, whatever it is, the game that you choose, and like sit down and talk about how you feel using that pad in comparison to others, right?
100%.
Yeah. Like, I love the mousepad company mousepad. I used it. It was my main mousepad go-to for all my setups for a long time.
Yeah.
And then the artisan pads started to get popular. Then you had to pay $100 to get an artisan pad, like on Amazon or whatever, because you had to get it shipped from Japan. And so I'm like, okay, let me try this. And then I really like that pad. And then like 4D Gaming comes out, and now 4114, and they're all making great mouse pads like in a set area. It's like, for me, I'm just like, that's a lot of mouse pads, a lot of like options out there.
Yeah.
I know if I was in a position where I could only afford to spend $60 once on a mouse pad,
right,
I want some kind of information that is easy for me to understand. I don't want to have to watch 6 videos, right? Like breaking down the 414 pad, or breaking down the 4D Gaming pad, breaking down this pad.
Right.
So I figured like that's why I wanted to make this one. And I don't know that I'm going to be a product YouTuber by any means.
Yeah.
But I'll have some fun with it, because it's something like I genuinely like don't mind talking about.
Right.
And so it'll create conversations and hopefully provide some kind of information for people out there that like are looking in the holiday season to get a new mouse pad, because they're not cheap.
Yeah.
The good ones at least are not cheap.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's definitely been a fun little project for me. I like produced one version of this video and it felt disingenuous, so I scrapped the whole thing
Mm.
Damn.
and restarted.
And that was
But
one of
that's
your one of your Twitter videos that I saw.
Mhm.
I think the first one that I saw was about that, where you kind of you did this really cool hook, where you're like, this is how far I got into this video. It was about improvement, I think, in the game, and then you were like, yeah, I scrapped it. It just didn't feel right, and you were like, okay, so I'm just gonna and your whole video became about it's okay, get it right, do it well. And do something that feels authentic to you instead of just rushing it out for content's sake. And I think that's kind of very much along the lines of what we're talking about in terms of like that pressure when you're trying to make this a career versus just doing it because you love it and having that career stability. And that is something that I've talked to a lot of creators about in the recent past few weeks, especially because I've been kind of grappling with this whole thing of like, I don't even know if I want to make content creation or more specifically streaming. I really don't want to be dependent on people's charity. That's just something like, it's not a good business model at the end of the day. It should not be about how many people can I convince to give me their money, because then that's just such a tightrope to walk of like, okay, you do start becoming manipulative or you start doing things specifically for this. How many donations can I get? And I think we saw this like with that whole Subtober thing, where subs are X amount % off. So we saw everybody doing subathons right at the end of that month, and people started calling out these creators of like, this is a very obvious ploy to get your viewers money instead of doing a subathon for the right reasons. But, it sparked a debate because people were saying, well, but if I'm dependent on this for my career and this is my income, why wouldn't I try and get the most money possible? So then it becomes this balance of, oh, well, are you being manipulative or are you doing good business? And, but yeah, so I kind of want to go back to, do you think that Twitter is being underutilized as a platform for content creators?
1000%. So let's take, who's a good example?
We need receipts.
I'm trying to think. Yeah, I want good examples here. I'm very much like facts based. Like, I don't want to just say something.
Yeah, for sure.
I think a good example of this, Hugh Moran. Let's see, Hugh Moran. He's got 9,000 followers on Twitter, and he is a Fortnite like not necessarily just Fortnite focused, but he does like comedic skits and stuff. But a lot of his big ones that blew up were Fortnite based, right?
Yeah.
He's got 1 million subscribers on YouTube, big on TikTok. Doing a lot of like really, really impressive things.
Right.
And if you look at like his Twitter, right, he doesn't really post much of that stuff on Twitter. Occasionally he does, but not often. And when he does post that stuff on Twitter, that's when you see his engagement and his numbers rise.
Yeah.
Like if he were to consistently take like once a week, twice a week, take TikToks or whatever else that short form content that he produces and put it solely, or not just solely on Twitter, but put it on Twitter as well.
Yeah.
You're going to see your brand grow.
Yeah.
And I think Twitter is like, it is one of the few places that you can actually directly connect with an audience.
Yeah.
You can't do it on YouTube. Like TikTok, you have to worry about the comments, and like comments of a TikTok are just like a viral TikTok is impossible.
So
right?
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of brain cells sometimes in the comments, but I think I think Twitter is the place, right? So for me, I don't mind investing in Twitter because I love the conversations, right? And I think conversations with an audience are important. People want to feel that they're connected to a genuine individual. They don't want to feel like they're like watching a character, right? Which, to be fair, like a lot of people are characters, right? And some it's less obvious than others, right? But a lot of characters in the scene, and people still they want to feel connected to you. And so when you're authentic and genuine and have these conversations, like no one can attack me for who I am, right? Like I'm not out here like did you know you can get level 100 immediately with this
Yeah.
XP boost by jumping on a bunker and putting a porta fortress down?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, don't get me wrong, get your bag, guys. But like at the end of the day, if you
You're
put,
being authentic, but yeah.
if you decide to put out like some content of value, information, whatever,
Yeah.
people, I would just
100%.
lean towards thinking it's BS because a majority of the content that they produce is
Right.
based on like these false narratives.
Would
So
you
Yeah.
would you say that it's due to like be Twitter's community being so open and being able to be your authentic self? Would you say it's due to like a big part of that reason would be Twitter's restrictiveness being a lot lower or a lot, you know, um, like Twitter's restrictiveness of what you can say and what goes is
yeah.
a lot more. What's the word for it? It's a lot more open, I guess you could say, than other platforms. Would you say that's a big point?
Ooh, I think in recent days, uh, maybe. I think the growth of the platform has been actually pretty substantial since Elon took
Since
over,
Elon took over, hundred
which
percent.
is very interesting to think about because most people, again, there's like the echo chamber of like certain creators that are like, "Oh, Twitter sucks now." It's
I don't think
like
so.
the growth of the platform has been pretty
Yeah.
massive, and I
Significant,
think
at least.
yeah, and I think it's not he's all about free speech and stuff with the platform, but he also isn't going to allow like hate speech either.
Hmm.
Hundred
Like you
percent.
still see like the overtly negative stuff that shouldn't be on your timeline or on your post getting hidden or removed.
Yeah.
So it's like I like the state of Twitter now. I know he just went on the news. I forgot which news channel. I don't know if you guys saw this. And he
Mm-mm.
I think I
basically
might have.
said, yeah, he said F you to the advertisers. And he says, if we die, it's because of you guys.
The
Mm.
advertiser. I can
Yeah,
see that.
he went straight at Disney, but like Bob Iger and some of the other guys, because he said something that like was taken as anti-Semitic. I don't know exactly the term. I didn't I didn't look in the situation that far,
Mm.
Yeah.
but I do think Twitter is realistically a really a unique platform,
Yeah.
um, and no one has the audience like Twitter does.
Yeah.
Like you
Right.
even
It.
look at like numbers
100%.
for Instagram and the others. Like
Yeah.
Twitter is here and they're here.
It's a
Yeah.
massive avenue for growth, and I think
Hmm.
it's overlooked in that sense. Having a Twitter presence, it does. I think that's the biggest thing is you can feel you feel the most connected. I think to the creator compared to any other platform, and I think because I think it takes, it takes that aspect of like Twitch, for example, with its interactivity and you have chat, but it kind of it strips away the character aspect, right? Like they're not performing in that moment. They're tweeting, they're tweeting to be themselves. And it feels a lot more, I think, in line. It just feels more genuine because a lot of times a lot of times it's just, generating, oh, this is my thought. This is whatever, or this,
Yeah.
it has that direct interactivity where you can feel connected to that person way more than a YouTube comment or whatever. Because a YouTube comment, it's like, yeah, it's just kind of going at the video. The
Yeah.
person probably won't see it, and like so, some creators do try and create a sense of that by going back in and responding to however many, but it'll never be as real time and as real and as interactive
Yeah.
as Twitter is.
There's also like just as there's like YouTube content creators that are known in the scene, like YouTube content creators that we know in the scene, like everybody knows, like PewDiePie, Mr. Beast, all that.
Yeah.
Same thing on TikTok. We know certain creators like Kaby Lame, Charlie D'Amelio, whatever. And on Twitter, there is a few of them. There's not as many, but there is a few of them just because of the way that Twitter's, I guess, for now, like shaped and also like the maturity on it because of the restrictiveness. There's certain people that we know, like there's I don't know if you guys know them as much. There's people like there's Juju, there's Kira, there's a few
Yeah.
people that like
Hmm.
just tweet random stuff or tweet about everything and they just like get views because they're funny and whatnot. In that same sense, I feel like Twitter's restrictiveness is like, yeah, there's downplays to it, there's downfalls to it. There's also, sometimes it's questionable. But at the same time, I feel like it allows for people to be genuine. It allows for people to be their authentic self without having to worry about like what could go wrong.
Mm.
Even though there is issues with it when it comes to like TOS, of course,
Yeah.
and like quote unquote family friendly maturity. It's
It's
like Twitter allows to be yourself.
it's not as
Allows for you to
doctored.
be
I think that's what it is.
Exactly.
It's they don't worry. Creators don't worry so much about conforming it to some character or brand or whatever. And I think that's what people are seeing through. I think that's like that's more who they are. That's what I would say is it's less doctored because they pay less attention to dressing it up or whatever.
One thing you can like highly connect it to is like the messaging on every app. Like on Instagram, you can get muted for certain things. On TikTok, there are literally words that are somehow family friendly, but for TikTok it's not family friendly that you can't even send. And then it would like literally just say delete the message. On Twitter, you could say pretty much whatever, positive or negative, and in any context, and it probably won't get muted.
Well, and Twitter and direct messaging is the most in line with Twitter's structure, right? Because it's public forum to private conversation. That's an easier transition to make than I'm watching a video and then I'm going to try and message the creator, the maker of this video who just put it out. There's no guarantee they're even on the app right now. You know, like Twitter, that's a much more. It's like pulling somebody out of a public place for a private conversation. That's a lot more compatible, I guess, in my head.
I think for me, like low-key Twitter, even though we do social media outside of like our main forms of content are on YouTube, TikTok, Twitch, whatever.
Yeah.
I honestly enjoy the Twitter, just the scrolling aspect.
I love Twitter.
Opinions
same.
and whatnot. I just enjoy it to the point where it's like, I don't need to force myself to make content on the platform. I don't need to tell myself, oh, I'm going on Twitter to make content. Oh, I'm going on Twitter to make a tweet. I'd rather just read people's tweets. And even if I don't feel like responding to them, it's like, oh, damn. That's a cool point of view.
I think Twitter is the best way that I've networked and connected with people fully. I mean,
100%, 100%.
I mean, like Panda is a great example. I reached out to you. Man, it feels like forever ago now. I think it might have been right after Invitational. But I messaged you on Twitter and I was like, hey man, like, you know, I'm trying to get into the space. I think I might want to be a caster, like whatever. And you were very kind and receptive and like gave me some good advice. And like we had a little bit of a back and forth on Twitter, and like there's just no other platform that you can do that on. There's not a place that I can get a hold of a Monster D-Face or a Panda. Yeah, no.
I'm not gonna go and be like, yo, I'm gonna text him on TikTok. I'm gonna text him on. Usually, you can
like
say Instagram,
Twitch whispers, like you're not gonna.
Yeah, that stuff gets buried.
Has to be like one of the more
for sure.
No, for sure.
Twitch whispers has to be one of the most useless like forms of connecting with somebody, or in general, just like a feature.
Don't get it. I'm gonna be honest. I like. And the only things that I get in whispers are scams. It's like people hey man, you just want a free gift card for being in this chat. And I'm like, no. I'm not gonna click your link. But honestly, it's funny because I do this on purpose. The best way to reach me is Twitter DMs. Like more than anything, right? Discord messages, even text messages sometimes. Twitter DMs are easier to get a hold of me. And some of my friends personally know that. But like anybody can message me, and I have it set that way for a reason, because I'll check my message requests often if I don't follow, right? Or if I do follow you, you're instantly getting a hold of me. And it's like, I thought that was always a special way to do things.
Yeah.
Like when if people have questions for me, shoot me a DM. If people have need help with something, like don't get me wrong, I love I talk about Boop in the way that I do now, but we've had conversations in the past where he'll just DM me for help and I'll help him out. I'm here always to help, right? And if you shoot me a DM and you have things that I can genuinely help with, whether it be information, knowledge, stuff like that, then 100%. I'm gonna respond. But if you DM me, give me chapter 5 leaks, please.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
No.
Dang it, that was my next question.
No, dude.
I have one. Oh, I gotta find this. This was actually insane to me. It was going on for easily probably 2 months. Every single day, I would get a message, and now I can't seem to find it because I finally responded. I was like, what? And they were basically like, please give chapter 5 battle pass, please. Every day. And sometimes it'd be multiple times a day. And I'm like, dude, awesome. I actually actively check this stuff. Like don't
You're
do
polluting
that.
my DMs. Pass, Please get out.
Should have just gave him the battle pass.
Hey, it's dedication, man. It's just
Yeah, it's
misplaced
just-
dedication, maybe.
He's a true hustler. 2 months is crazy.
Oh yeah, it's just it was literally 2 months every day, sometimes multiple times a day.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
And
so
like
funny.
I couldn't make this stuff up if I tried.
He wasn't
like-
enjoying OG Fortnite, man. He was not enjoying OG Fortnite. He wanted the chapter 5.
It was
Oh,
dude, I think it was
man.
even before OG Fortnite, to be
Oh,
honest.
100%.
Oh
If it was
my
2 months,
goodness.
but still.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
That's actually so funny.
So I guess I'll use that as a segue to chapter 5. So chapter 5 releases in what day is it? What, Thursday, Wednesday?
Today is Thursday,
Thursday,
the
so
30th.
3 days
It
from
comes
now.
out, yeah, Sunday.
Yeah, Sunday.
I
The-
think.
Or the
Saturday's
event.
You never-
the event, right?
You never know
Yeah,
for sure. They could put us in a
Saturday-
black hole for 6 weeks, and then
They
we're
could.
all
They
just
could.
doomed.
They could.
Saturday 2 Eastern is the event, and then we will have chapter 5 by then. So I mean, just anything that you want to say about it or can say
Keep
about
hope.
it. I mean,
Yeah.
like, first of all, I'm unbelievably hyped. I think this is
Same.
I think
Yeah.
I think this is the biggest hype that we've had for a chapter release in a maybe ever. Definitely in a long time. I think maybe
Since
like
chapter 1 to 2, I'd say.
right, and
Since
I
chapter
think
1 to 2.
that was just because it was the first one. We had no clue
Yeah.
what to expect.
Yeah.
And that I honestly think that the release of chapter 2 was very underwhelming. Like the event and the build
that's
up
not
and
even a
like the
hot
black
take.
hole. The
Yeah,
black hole was
that's not even a hot
incredible. And I mean I literally had my console on in the basement of my house. I had like streams up all over. I was not missing a moment. I wanted every opinion. I wanted every creator's voice. Like there was a collective like hysteria around that because it was just like, what is going on? What's going to happen? And I was like legitimately having withdrawals from Fortnite because I was like, this is like, I need to play the game. Like, this is insane. And it felt like weeks. I don't even remember how long the actual black hole was, but it felt like months of my life was taken off.
It
yeah,
was like 2 days, I want to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like when you generate that much hype, I don't think much will live up to that expectation, if I'm being honest. Because chapter 2, when it released, was actually like pretty well done in the sense that they fixed a lot of the issues with chapter 1's map that was like certain elevation points became too hard to counter and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Thinking from like a more competitive standpoint, but they spent too much time in or the season 1 of chapter 2 because of
6 months is crazy.
I fully understand.
I think it was COVID and all that stuff going on at the same time, which is what caused it.
Yeah, I fully understand like taking it back to basics for the release of a new chapter so that you have a good starting point to ramp up throughout the rest of the chapter. But I think it was just that, I mean, it was literal months. It was a months long season. And then season 2 was like almost as long as well, which season 2 was amazing. Like that, the heist theme, there's a reason they went back to it in chapter 4 because it was really well done. But it was just like, it felt like such a long season, and when we had such a pure meta in terms of like the loot pool and just everything like that was in the game, that it got bland very quickly. Because it was so like baseline.
Would you say that the graphic change of chapter 1 to 2 was a very big and substantial or significant difference?
I definitely
Mentally,
felt
yes.
different. Yeah, I think like you've come accustomed to, and I think like kind of what you were talking about earlier. I think when you think about the identity of Fortnite up until the release of chapter 2, the chaos and the cartoony, just entropy of all of it was like, that was the brand. I mean, you had season X was characterized by just like anything and everything that could be going on was going on. Every POI had a gimmick. You had unbelievable variety in terms of items and weapons and utility and heals. I mean, it was just so dense with content and unique stuff. You never got bored because there was just always something new, and they were doing the weekly content updates and all that stuff. So I think to swing from one end of the pendulum to another so quickly, and for that to be the expectation leading into chapter 2, and then to get this like very quiet, calm, reserved in comparison. There wasn't craziness. So I mean, they added swimming, they added like the whole fishing mechanic, but like in comparison to what season X was, where you had planes and 5 different rifles and 4 different shotguns and shockwaves and a meteor in the sky and every POI had a different gimmick. The pacing felt so slow comparatively. And I think for the casual player base, especially because really competitive was just emerging at that time. That was really Chapter 2 was the competitive, like kind of the arch up to the competitive boom, because we got World Cup in season 9, and then we had
started in season 10.
Yeah, we had the first ever FNCS. So we're brand new coming into this format. Competitive isn't really established yet. It hasn't really gotten its feet. It's just in its infanthood. So you had this it appealed to the competitive audience in a very good way. It was a very pure competitive meta. There wasn't really much that that was like, oh, this is a stupid way to die or whatever. It was very you get your pump shotgun, you get your AR, you get your heals. That's it. You have your SMGs and whatever. So it was a very distinct change of pace for people. And I think that took out the identity for what was the overall player base, because I don't think that competitive and casual had really split yet. I think we saw, in the early days of Chapter 2 with creative and then just with, that distinct break, we saw that skill ceiling or that skill disparity really begin to climb. And then it really became apparent in the Stark season where competitive had gotten to in relation to the casual audience. I mean, you had people drop in. I mean, I remember Mongrel's video during Stark season, the 39 kill solo trio arena game. I mean, that was really unheard of, before, because that was a competitive game mode. And then we're seeing this disparity between what is actually a pro or a top player versus a competitive enthusiast versus a casual player. And we had people dropping 50, 60, 70 bombs,
Mongrel was the EU blow up of that. And then there was also Reet as well. That was when Reet was taking over the NA side of that part.
So so the skill disparity growth really happened in those early days of Chapter 2, the first half of Chapter 2. And I mean, I remember even Nick Merckx was still competing in Chapter 2 Season 2, and it was very shortly thereafter that he just fell off the wagon, and it was we were he can't compete. It was 2-3 seasons prior to that he was killing Booga, and Booga was complaining about aim assist. That clip on top of so it's it was a time of massive rapid development in the skill ceiling of the game, and I think that is what made Chapter 3 so unique too, because that was felt in that chapter shift. People by the end of Chapter 2, you had the competitive scene and the casual scene, and they had never been a greater divide. It was so difficult. If you weren't already a decent player, there was no way that you were going to be able to compete. So in terms of a chapter release, I do think because of OG Fortnite and because of they're kind of going back to their identity, and I mean, OG Fortnite is a very literal sense of that, but I think even in a metaphorical sense, we've kind of seen some of the same development tools kind of employed that we're going to see, that catering to the casual audience. And I think we're going to see a reemergence. I think this is going to be the biggest chapter release since that Chapter 1 to Chapter 2 transition.
I think it's very possible.
It feels the most like OG Fortnite that it did. And you have all these creators that are backing that right now too, that are oh, we want to go into that. And I think Ninja kind of hit it on the head here, is people are expecting to stay in OG Fortnite or whatever. And I don't think that was ever the goal. The goal was to, and honestly, it'd be a bad idea, from a development standpoint. I've always said that if they try to do anything like this, I thought it was going to be an LTM, the way they would do the OG Fortnite thing. But they would have to keep it. I was
hoping for that, but
they would have to keep it short and sweet, because people forget that by the end of Chapter 1, we were begging for a new map. We were begging for a new meta. We were we're sick of this. We've played this map for tens of thousands of hours. Please give us something new.
People forget that.
Yeah, no, they do.
They really do. People forget that it was 27. It was basically 2017 to 2020. We played on the same map.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy to think about.
Isn't that insane?
And people, we knew every rock,
to this day,
we knew every crevice, we knew every yeah. Well, and we, that nostalgic bias is very powerful. People go, how did I feel when I was playing during that time, when I was on that map? And they misattribute it to the conditions of the game at that time. It was it was those things that made the game great in that time. But what makes you remember it fondly is how you felt and how life was during that time. Because I could tell you,
100%.
as a sophomore in high school, I certainly had a lot less to worry about, and I could make a lot. I could worry about Fortnite all day. All I could think about was I'm gonna get home and play Fortnite. And like that. That's just even if we could go back now with all. If I were to go back in time now with all the responsibilities and knowledge and stuff that I have, it wouldn't be the same because my life is different. I'm different, and that's what people fail to realize. They think that going back to the conditions of the game are going to recreate that time in their life, and it won't, and it never will. And that's what nostalgic bias is like you view it as you remember it, not as it would be objectively. But yeah, I mean, we've just been rambling. What are your thoughts on Chapter 5 from a competitive standpoint and just as an enjoyer of the game?
Competitively, I imagine we see the same thing we saw this year.
Mm.
I think we see a major system into a global. I think it just makes the most sense.
Yeah, I agree.
The most logical competitive year we've ever had. And it's the first time in competitive history that they gave us a year-long roadmap.
Yeah.
For what competitive looks like. So I think if they're going to do anything, they found success in that. Global was the biggest event since World Cup. They're going to do that again.
Yeah.
I also think as far as like what could improve that roadmap is throw one invite only in LAN in. And I think it should be either you're really content focused and you would do it in the States.
Yeah.
Or you host it you host like an uber competitive one and I still think you have to do it in the US. Like here's the problem think people are not thinking about too much going into it or going into the new year. Europe has these new laws coming into place that every single individual traveler needs to get permission to come into Europe. So
wow.
Denmark is part of that, right?
Yeah.
And so like the globals that happened this year, I'm sure there was tons of visas and things like that would have had to take place. But like I personally would have had to like apply months in advance to let them know that, hey, I'm traveling. And the problem with that system is it's not even like apply, get approved, and then buy your ticket. You have to buy your ticket, apply for approval, and then hope you don't get denied because then you're out thousands of dollars on flights to Denmark, which is like that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so I definitely
especially for esports and where esports is at right now. Like that is not, I mean, for any business, that's not an expense that you want to be taking. But esports, like I know that we were trying to send me through PL to do content at Denmark, and we were trying to like put this money together. That was a significant amount of our budget that we were planning to like invest in all of the content that we would have gotten out of it. That's not something that we can drop even more than 2 times a year, So it's like that, like esports is not at a place where money is abounding right now, So it's like that. Yeah, that's a massive undertaking for any org or individual.
No, for sure. And I think when you think about esports, like don't get me wrong, Europe has a die-hard fan base for esports. And so I think it's probably easier to fill up a stadium like Royal Arena in Europe than it would have been in the US. But I also think just innate, like just travel, both for all the Epic employees and talent and everything else that have to travel out. Like, because I think a majority of talent as of right now are US based.
Yeah.
So you have like Kelly. So you have Kelly, Jacob, Monster, Taco, Zeke. Who else? I feel like there's definitely Vivid.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm missing more. But anyway, that's 6 out of 9, right?
Yeah.
6 out of 10, let's just say. Because hosts flip in and out. So it's hard to tell who they keep as a host for EU. But realistically, it's probably easier to get them into the States than it is to fly a bunch of people over to Europe with all these new rules coming in place. And if they do it exactly like they did last year, which was studio shows, we were flying to like the major that I did. We flew to Denmark for a month. Like it was like the core team was there for 4 or 5 weeks, I want to say, and then some of us flew in for like 2 to 3. So it's a lot of time spent out there. And so if they do it again, I think they may try to move everything to the States, events, studio stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like it would just be easier, but it's hard to tell because again, we haven't heard anything,
Mm.
like publicly, even privately. Like it's funny because people will come to me often and they're like, I joked about the DMs earlier, and they're like, Chapter 5 or what is happening,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I feel like I'm a pretty knowledgeable guy. I still have zero clue.
Yeah.
Like
Sure.
you just don't know.
Yeah.
And so, while it'd be cool to know what is getting ready to happen, innately we don't always get that information, or even really get that information at all.
Yeah.
So
Right?
that information's more of like in an inner core right now.
Yes.
Well, and the
And I think
casters, I mean, it's not really part of your job description. Necessarily. It's
yeah.
you're on a need to know. You know, it's like, oh yeah. I mean, you know,
Typically, when they announce it, is
is when
we
you're
find
here.
out.
Yeah, because I remember,
Right.
I think Aussie talked about that right after he got released about like, there was some big announcement like around that time, and he was like, that was the first I heard of it. Like he was like, they let us know 5 minutes before on the broadcast when they're saying this is what you're gonna say. Like, you know, so yeah, I just think that's
Like,
the standard for Epic, especially because they're like, these are big things, these are corporate secrets, you know, so we don't want to, anyone who doesn't need to know won't, and that, you know,
Yeah.
it makes sense from a business perspective. But
well, and like a good example of this is like the Invitational, right?
Mm.
I think we found out because we had just started the studio shows when they were
Yeah.
going to announce the Invitational. It was like the last week of the studio shows that they announced it, I'm pretty sure. And I think we found out in our rehearsal,
Mm.
which was like the day before.
Yeah.
Um, but it was just because it was part of the show. And then
Right.
like the Invitational show, for example, like um I heard like they had that the big announcement to talk about the collision event or whatever it was.
Yeah.
I forgot exactly what they called it. But that moment that Adam picks up the
Yeah.
trophy and puts it down, and it
Yeah.
blacks out and shows the event.
Yeah.
No one knew what that was.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were just told, "Hey, go." Like Adam just told, "Hey, go do this,"
Yeah. Yeah.
and then he said, "So like." People really think that we know everything, like we know what's happening, we know what's in the thought
Right.
process.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
we might know,
I don't know.
like if we're working on a content piece, for example,
Yeah.
Right.
we might know what that content piece is going to be and when it's
Yeah.
going to come out, right? Like,
Yeah.
guess what? We have to know that, right? But outside of that, we just don't
Yeah.
really get information like that.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I mean, it makes sense why they don't
Yeah.
say a lot to pastors,
Anyone.
hosts,
Yeah.
podcasters.
Well, because
And
you guys
even
are
just, like,
technically
even just, like,
independent contractors, yeah. You guys
Yeah.
are not technically employees, so it's even more so of like you're on a need to know.
Well, and we all sign NDAs
NDAs.
and stuff.
Yeah.
do you feel like it's still like it's better that way though? Like not knowing about these certain things, or would you rather?
As a fan, yes.
Mm.
As a business person, no. Because like realistically, I like to know what my schedule's going to look like. So if I am working an event, it's good for me to know ahead of time, right?
Mm.
Right.
Especially when I'm in the process, like I'm kind of hinted at before, I'm in the process of building a business.
Yeah.
And so this business is going to take a substantial amount of my time in the new year. So I need to make sure that
Yeah.
I have a balance between still handling all of the talent work that I get on top of building this business, which fortunately I should be able to do the business from pretty much anywhere the way
Nice.
that it's working out. So it won't necessarily be too much of a problem, but it's still time consuming nonetheless.
Yeah. It's awesome that you bring up that you are becoming an entrepreneur, or I guess another entrepreneur, in a sense of owning a business, because we've seen this trend a lot recently in the esports space, and I think it's really good. It's an awesome, because it was just like we were talking about earlier, of like career stability and not wanting to be reliant on charity and all of that stuff. And we've seen Monster do the same thing with his coffee company, which is super cool. Cafe
Yeah.
Colazzo.
Shout out Cafe Colazzo, man.
Yeah.
That coffee's good too.
Really, I'm yet to try it, but I know
So,
that Monster's
just
a good businessman. So
Yeah, quick plug for him. His coffee, like I love energy supplements, right? And I love coffee. And his coffee is like you order it it gets roasted, bagged, and sent in the same day.
Wow, that's awesome.
So it's like,
Damn.
yeah,
I'm a big
it's
coffee
actually
guy, so
insane the
that's
quality.
I like
I'm
coffee a lot
yeah,
too, bro.
and I mean, I think that's
Especially
that's
keeping it
it.
alive.
That's the
Hit him
that should
up.
be the
Maybe he'll sponsor the pod.
that would be
We
awesome.
might need it. We might
but-
just need it.
But I think that's an awesome route to take, and I think that's where esports should head. And we've talked about this so many times, and I've used this example, and I'm glad you brought it up earlier. Is the mousepad company Epic Whale took?
Give me 1 second. Someone is knocking at my door.
No problem.
I don't know what that is. I don't know if there's a pod in the podcast, but I'm sorry. I'll be right back.
No worries.
I think I can pause the recording. Let me see.
You can. On OBS, you can.
I wasn't able to.
And then you updated it.
Yeah. Well, no. I don't know.
All right.
Nah, they're not that bad, but like they are very conversational, and it's like I'm in a meeting. I'll like, can you come back later? And they're like, it's just really gonna take like 2 seconds, and I'm like, but like I'm in the middle of something. And I had to run downstairs. I'm like,
yappers, man,
but-
yapping neighbors. No.
Wait, so the studio, like the studio that you're at, is that how far is that separate from your home or house?
This is my house.
This is your house, right? Okay, that's what I was thinking. as well.
So, basically, the way that my house works is I have 4 bedrooms and a bonus room.
Okay.
Damn.
The first floor is master bedroom, living room, kitchen, and that's
Yeah.
where me and the dogs and my wife live.
Mhm.
And then upstairs is basically a guest bedroom and then like office spaces.
Mhm.
So like I have this studio, which I'm getting ready to redo. I have a podcast studio right here. And then the bonus room is like for like miscellaneous shoots and stuff.
Nice.
Because my wife is a photographer as well.
Oh, very cool.
Nice.
But that's not like her main job, but like she does that on the
Yeah,
side.
yeah.
So she has
Very
space
cool.
for that stuff too.
Nice.
What were we
Did
talking
you-
about before? I don't even remember.
You said something about the mousepad company.
Yes. So Epic Whale's mousepad company. So,
Mhm.
taking that temporary, fame, recognition, momentum, whatever you want to call it, and turning that into something with longevity that stretches beyond your individual brand. Because I think this happens a lot with creator products and creator businesses is they keep it tied to their personal brand. So if their brand goes under, if they get canceled or if they fall off or if they whatever, like their company will also go under. And we've I think with Epic Whale's mousepad company, it's a great example of all of his initial marketing, if you want to put it that way, was his personal brand. Everyone was like, "Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it's the Fortnite guy. It's the guy who made millions of dollars and went to World Cup." But now he built the business in a way that it transcended that. It's now its own thing. It's a stable business with or without him, and that should be the goal because now he's set. Now even if he wants to stop streaming or any of that stuff, he can take a step back and still be the CEO of a successful gaming peripheral company.
Yeah.
And that's
Which
like
I think his brother is the CEO.
So
but he-
EEO?
yeah,
Okay.
He has another executive role in it. But
Yeah.
like no, it's a really good point. I do think he needs to be careful though, because like I think he got comfortable for a little bit, and now all these mousepad companies are coming out of the woodwork. So he definitely and I think they realize that because they put out like a performance mousepad apparently not too long ago. And you've seen Epic Whale pick up a little bit more communication on the mousepad company recently, like took pictures with his brother making mousepads and stuff like that.
yeah.
So I definitely think they realize there's some sharks in the water competition, so
Yeah.
to speak.
Well, I mean, Ceases is a great example. Cease and Elevate, that took that project
like-
and 3 years of development, I think they said, before they actually released, which is great. I love to hear. Yeah, that looks
Like
sick.
look at how cool that stick
That
looks.
looks yeah.
And so imagine like you have a sick design, which is so unique.
Yeah.
And then also simultaneously, it is like one of the best mousepads ever created.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Well, and that's the big
I'm not
thing
gonna
is
give
they
too
didn't-
much away from my review, but like,
Yeah.
it is a very special mousepad.
They didn't shortcut it. And I think that's a massive point just to everyone in esports, because that seems to be what the collective thinks esports is a fast track to fame and fortune and, career. And, because they see what they think are overnight sensations and all these people, blowing up and all this stuff. And it's like, the best, most successful people in this industry built it on the back of something else, and it took a long time, and they invested a lot. I mean, a lot of them. I mean, like your personal story. You got your start while you were working another job, and it started as a passion project. It didn't turn into a career until later. So people can look at you and go, "Oh man, like he just popped up in the esports scene, and he just all of a sudden was successful." It's like that's not at all how the story went. And I think building a business is the same way.
Yeah.
Building a business is not just a path to millions overnight. Being an entrepreneur is one of the hardest things that you can do. Period. And if you want to build a business fast, it will fail 99 times out of 100.
Yes.
So like with Cease and Elevate, I think it's really cool and important that they highlighted the fact that they went into development for 3 years, that they've been building this business behind the scenes way before they released it. It wasn't an idea, 2 months ago, and now they have a product. It was, meticulous planning and building and development to be ready for this release. And now look at the fruits of their labor so far after. And I think that, in the esports scene, when you look at streamers, when you look at basically any role in the scene, orgs, streamers, anything that you want to highlight, all of that, there's work that was unseen at the beginning that plays into all these people that you see now. So just because your perspective is that they were an overnight sensation because that's when they came on your radar, doesn't mean that that's the entire story. But I like this trend of creator-led businesses because that's the best way. It's the best asset you have as a creator is your audience and your influence. So using that for something just beyond, being a self-sustaining entity and actually being your own marketing, essentially. You talked about businesses dish out so much money to marketing, and it's the number one thing that will determine, if a business really picks up or not. Because you can have a fantastic product, but if nobody knows about it or what it is, then it's not going to do you any good. If you become your own marketing for free because you're a creator that people watch, you are skipping probably the hardest part of starting a business. So yeah, I love that trend, and I love taking something that's temporary and turning it into longevity. And that should be the direction of esports. And it's going to create, an ecosystem in the space. It's going to create competition. And now all of a sudden, look, the community, like the Fortnite community, is blessed with multiple mousepad companies now that from creators that they know that are high quality. I mean, I swear by mousepad company mousepads. I'm going to get a 4114 pad as soon as I can. Not only because I know those people and I want to support them, but because I've heard the glowing reviews from each. And like the mousepad company mousepad, I loved the design. I'm a big philosophy and Eastern Asian culture guy. So when they had their artist series release and they had these, ancient Chinese paintings and all that stuff, I was like, that's so sick. That's so me. So I and now I swear by the product I have too. And I love them. And I use them whenever I can. So that's just a big thing. And I love that we're getting into that. And I love that we're being entrepreneurs because that's what esports is, man. It's venturing into new things. It's being self-taught. I think that's one of the coolest things about esports for me is like basically everyone who's in a position in esports right now got themselves to this point because they self-taught. There isn't an industry standard yet. There isn't a normal track to get wherever you're going. It's just venture out and do it and put yourself out there and be willing to learn. And, if you just keep going, you'll find success somewhere.
Yeah. Being an entrepreneur is more than, like, going back to the whole entrepreneur factor, it's more than just searching up how to make your business. It's more than just finding a tips and tricks video. It's more than just searching up like how to cold call. Like
it's more than making a logo and a Twitter and just saying, "Oh yeah, we have a business now." Like it's like no, yeah.
It takes so much time, and people think that entrepreneurs, especially in this generation, it becomes a lot easier to do because there's like, what is there? There's drop shipping. People make drop shipping look mad easy. They look at social media marketing, look mad easy. I've been in both. It is not easy. Drop shipping, realistically, a lot of it is for drop shipping specifically. A lot of it is luck, and then for social media marketing, it is hard to get your first client. After that, it becomes a little easier, but to get your first client is one of the hardest processes, and it gets so frustrating because it's a repetitive thing. Yeah. It can be genuinely some of the most draining stuff, but when you're confident and you're like you care to actually make, whether it's to make a living, whether it's to make a side hustle off of it, you will put in that time and effort. Same like you do for content creation, same like you do for any passion you have in life. you'll be willing to put that effort in if you want to see results out of it. But
Yeah.
it can be mentally draining at some times.
No, 100%. And I think it's funny you mentioned like drop shipping, for example. Like drop shipping is like people make these videos and they're like, buy my course because it'll teach you how to be millionaire. It's like
Yeah.
what they don't show you is that they spent $1.5 million on ads
Yeah.
to get those numbers, which they're down 500K, which is why they need you to buy a course. Do you think, like realistically, do you think a disingenuous person like that, like somebody that's like in an industry like that, is going to be like, hey, guess what, guys? I'm going to give you all the keys to how I made all my money,
Yeah.
and now it's going to be saturated. I'm not going to make more money. No, it doesn't. Like,
Right.
it
This is
doesn't
what's
work
making
like
them
that.
their money.
Exactly, and it's like, to be fair, it was very similar to like and I know this will be a controversial take, but like Andrew Tate and his like Hustler University stuff.
Yep.
Like, while I think he in some ways is a better influence than others for a younger audience, I also think there is a lot of like stuff that he uses to take advantage of that, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Like talking about being like mentally strong and working out and stuff like that, and trying to like
Sure.
find ways to like be healthy, right? I
Yeah.
think is cool. It's a good influence for a young audience. But then like outside of that, like when he's talking about like, oh, if I have a girlfriend and I want to go sleep with her, I'm going to go do that. Or like what, like some of the other crazy stuff. That's just wild. Like it's a shock and awe factor to fill some of that. And of course that kind of birthed the real like boom of this IRL just chatting streaming stuff.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, you like that video that went viral of Neon, I think it was, in a Walmart doing like the Coke and Mentos just like in the aisle, and this went viral, and like
bro.
No, and I'm really glad that I saw it getting ripped on more than I saw it getting praised. But it's just like, dude, like this is stuff that you would get sent to the principal's office in middle school for. Why are you as a streamer making hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars a year doing this? I mean, it's just shitty content. It's so bad, and it's so stupid, and it's so immature. Like, you're not thinking about the fact that somebody has to clean up after you now, and like you might be banned from Walmart forever. Like, do you really want that to be the legacy and reputation that you leave behind? I mean, and that's I guess that's the thing, is like, and I've talked about this a lot. This is a motif of mine now, where I think there's two very distinct types of people in content creation. There are people who are in it for only themselves, and there are people who are in it for something bigger than themselves. And it becomes pretty clear the more you get to know these people, which one they are. And some of them will try to pretend to be the others. But you know, it's very clear what somebody's motivations are. You know, when you actually sit down or when you watch their content, the type of content they're making, and most importantly, I think the behaviors behind the scenes, how they're achieving what they're achieving. And the people that I've met that are doing it for something bigger than themselves, whether that's to educate or to entertain or to bring positivity into the world or whatever that, you know, that noble cause may be, they're just some of the best people I've ever met. And then on the flip side of that coin, in the same cohabitating the same space in the same industry, you have these people who are, you know, only in it for themselves, who are going to do whatever they need to, who are just going to play the game, who are going to, you know, do a Coke and Mentos in a Walmart and not give a fuck about, you know, how they're affecting all the people around them and the influence that they have on all the viewers. And that's a constant thing. That dichotomy is such an interesting thing, because it's so black and white, but it's hard to see who's who. You know, it's so distinct on what is what, and yet you can't always determine. And I can say that in my professional and in my personal, that I've had people that I thought were, you know, one way and they ended up being another. That's really disappointing. It's a really disappointing aspect of the space.
For them, it's like for those content creators, sometimes they look at short term way over long term.
Yeah, or they look at, you know, well, I don't care if I'm, you know, sucking money out of these kids because I'm gonna buy myself a Porsche or whatever. You know, it's like they only think about themselves or their own personal gain. I mean, you know, I talk about hedonism a lot, which is, you know, the philosophy of pleasure is king, and, you know, pursuing pleasure at any cost is what is morally right. And I think that's how a lot of people, whether they know how to articulate that or not, that's how they live their life, is I'm going to pursue my pleasure over anything and anyone else. So if what you want aligns with my pleasure, then yeah, I'll help you. And if it doesn't, then screw you. I'm going to tread all over you. But yeah, esports is such a unique industry, I think, for that reason, because you have two incredibly distinct polar opposite motivations, and yet it's hard to tell who's who sometimes.
Most times.
Yeah.
Like, to be fair, and you can ask somebody's done this. When he first met me, he thought there's no way someone can be this nice. He's full of shit. Like, there is just no way. And it's funny because we did shows together, and there was build up, and I offered to help him behind the scenes with awards show and like other things.
Yeah.
And so like I was just there, right?
Yeah.
And then we start hanging out. Like I moved to North Carolina, and he's like 15 minutes door to door from me now. Like,
oh, that's awesome. That's cool.
Yeah. So like we hang out all the time, and it's so funny because he'll say it too. Like I did his podcast not too long ago, the FN story, and it was literally like he even said it. It was right after the boop situation when he came at me, and he was like, dude, why are like he's like, I don't understand why people come at you. Like, people think that you are just like fake in your positivity, but it's like and he's like, I can say this with absolute positivity that he is a positive guy, and positive to a point where it's like he always finds a way to look at something in a positive light, because
positive light,
that's who I am. And and like, to a fault sometimes, like there could be like just stuff that, you know what, maybe it makes more sense in that person's life to just vent and be negative. But I always seem to like, hey, listen, I know, like breakups especially, it's like, I know this sucks now, but like that won't matter to you in 5 years. In 5 years, you could be X, Y, and Z because you're focused on you, doing whatever it is, right? And I've been very lucky. It's almost 10 years. I've been with the love of my life, my wife.
That's awesome.
And
congratulations.
I'm very fortunate to have been able to find that person early in life, but not everybody is going to have that same opportunity.
Yeah.
And so like, and people talk about this often where they're like, oh, maybe I focus more on me, like I focus this, that, and it's like, the one piece of like positivity that I can give anybody, and it's like positive advice, is like, realistically, your life goes the way you want it to.
Yeah.
And when I was in the darkest points of my life,
yeah,
I had my then girlfriend, now wife, next to me.
Yeah.
I had all these things, right?
Yeah.
But it's because I put myself in those dark positions that it led me down a rabbit hole, right? And I've changed a lot about my life, and I think that's what makes me who I am today. Is like, I surround myself, number one, with the right people.
Yep.
You can't put yourself in a group of people that are negative or innately just like talking down on themselves, talking down on you. Like, realistically, you need a good core group of people. Number two, you need to find things that make you happy and lean on those more than ever. And I think for a lot of people don't realize it. Exercise, in a lot of ways, is like such an insane vent. I box. Like, I love boxing, right?
Okay.
And so, like, don't get me wrong, I'm not running the miles to compete in a fight, but I'm still doing my core boxing stuff almost every day. And like, that is a nice release for me.
Yeah.
And so finding those outlets, finding things that like genuinely make you happy, are super, super important. And it keeps me positive. It keeps me where I'm at. And it's like, if I need a break from something, if I start to feel negative about something, I step away. You have to do it. Like, so being a positive person is who I am, but it's who I am by design. Like, I've worked very hard to put myself in all positive situations, so there is no negative in my life.
Yeah. I really like what you said, and I want to highlight that and kind of expand upon it, you have a lot more control over your life than some people would have you believe. Now, that's not to say that you have control over the situations that happen to you. I mean, Lord knows I've got my fair share of trauma and negative situations that have happened to me in my life that I didn't have control over whether those happened to me or not. What I did have control over was the way I responded and how I changed as a result of those things. And that was That was a big thing for me. I went through a whole slew of personal stuff 2 months ago, and the biggest focus for me during that, because it tends to spark these moments of introspection and growth more than the regular. I mean, you should always be introspective and you should always be growing, but you get into these real deep pockets of like kind of taking inventory of all of your life and really being like, oh wow, like, there's a lot here that I wasn't thinking about or that I wasn't being attentive enough to. And the biggest thing for that, like, it was a big loss for me. I lost a very important relationship in my life. But the biggest thing for me was I'm not going to allow this to be a purely negative thing, because obviously that in and of itself is negative, but it sparked so much, and I allowed it to, bring light to certain things that I needed to grow in. It allowed me to have awareness of certain things. It allowed me to take inventory of my other relationships that maybe I was neglecting a little bit and going, wow, I have a lot more people that care about me than I thought. And I really needed, the perspective on that to realize it, because I was just so, hyper focused on just, certain things. So I just, you have control over how you react and how you respond. And you have control over, making something positive out of what could be purely negative, because I could have just allowed it to destroy me and just be like, oh yeah, everything sucks, I hate life, I'm gonna quit everything and walk away. And that, I mean, it wouldn't have been a wrong reaction because it was a negative thing that happened, but it doesn't mean that there isn't potential for positive too. And that, that was a big thing for me. Is like, okay, negative situation can be growth. I mean, that's where the best and deepest growth comes from, is when you're knocked down or when life hits you really hard, and you do have a choice about how do you want to view this, how do you want to proceed going forward, who do you want to turn into as a result of this. And that's something that I keep in perspective, is like, think about who you're going to be on the backside of this, as opposed to how you're feeling right now. Because I think a lot of kids, and it's easy to feel that way. It's easy to feel like life has you by the reins and you just have nothing that you can do about it. And the most important thing is to make the most out of it that you can. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you react and how you respond and how you grow to those things.
100%. I think it's really interesting, right? No matter, and I have a friend who deals with severe depression, right?
Mm.
And like, there are medical things you can do to help that. I'm strongly against like medication and stuff for a lot of those things. I feel like there's a lot of like actual natural stuff, like vitamin deficiencies and things like that play a part in depression. Because of the state that it puts your body in, but that's a whole different conversation. But I also think it's like, for them, they still have control of what they do next, despite the depressive state that they're in, or anybody that's experiencing depression or anxiety in those ways. Despite what's going on, you can't let the emotion consume the next decision you make. It may make it harder to make the next decision you make,
for sure,
but you need to make sure you're still making the right decisions in the way that you go about it, because
it's giving all that you have. I think that was a great way that I was like, it trying to change my perspective on it, because everyone's saying, oh, all you have to do is just give 100% every day. And like, I've dealt with depression, and it was like, I don't have 100%. I promise you, like, it's just not in me. But what I heard was give all that you have. And I guess that put it in perspective for me, is like, if I have 1% today, as long as I'm giving that 1%, that's what matters. It's are you putting your foremost effort forward? And the another quote comes to mind of like, nothing changes unless something changes. Like, nothing changes if nothing changes. You have like, do the little things. Take that tiny step to do that one thing differently. Could be, start off taking vitamins, or start off doing going for a walk, a little bit of exercise, or whatever it is. And taking those little steps that turn into bigger steps, that turn into that snowballs over time, because you'll gain that percentage. You'll find that if you take that 1% one day, it'll turn into 2% in a week, and then whatever. It is a collective process, and it speaks again to things take time. It's not an overnight. Depression isn't cured overnight. I know for me it was years of therapy and just being able to. It was a slow process, and I grew progressively throughout that to be able to come out of it at the backside and go, wow, I grew a lot as a person. I changed a lot. I learned a lot. But it wasn't like there wasn't a distinct moment where I went, oh, my depression's gone. Like it was a very progressive, gradual system of like, I'm going every week. I'm doing what I can. I'm, doing what my therapist tells me to do, to then arrive at a point, years later where I was like, oh, wow, I don't have those thoughts anymore. I don't have those hangups. I'm not fatigued like I was, all those things. But there's no overnight cure, and there's no, oh, just choose to do it, just choose to not have it, essentially is what, some people are basically saying with their advice, which is like, yeah, you can't do that. It's choose to give everything that you have. I think that was a good thing to shift perspective for me.
And that, honestly, that's the best way to put it, because, and it's funny because people like, there are people that live on the polar opposite sides of that bubble, right? Where it's like, either depression doesn't exist, you make it up in your head, or depression consumes me, I can't do anything, right? And both are the wrong mindset. Like, I think there are actual chemical deficiencies and stuff that cause depression and anxiety at risen levels in the body. Like, there is actual medical science that proves that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So one side of that is completely gone. However, some of what they say is correct in the sense that, like, if you focus on you and you take certain protocols to change the way that your life operates, innately you forget that depression exists, and innately that depression has less control on your life.
Right.
And that's what it comes down to, is how much you control, or how much control you decide to give up. And we see depression heavy in the gaming space. Like, it is a massive ordeal, and it's something that people talk about Adderall all the time, but they're not talking about depression enough, I think, in gaming. And it's like, when you get consumed, especially at a pro level, and you're playing the game 12 hours a day, and things aren't going your way, and you seem to can't get out of this slump, that's an easy way to fall into depression. Queasy, I don't know that he's battling with depression, but what he's done, the way that he's balanced his life with working out, getting super healthy, but also still competing at the highest level, is remarkable. And it shows that anybody can do that, because he went on to win the most dominant FNCS in EU history, while also being the healthiest he's ever been physically and mentally, right?
And it's funny too, because it's not just a preventative measure. Like, working out and having balance, and not just in your physical life, in your social life and your mental too. Like, please balance that with other things. Go out and see IRL friends and all of that stuff. Like, please don't just sit behind a computer for 15 hours a day and have your entire life be through a screen. But it also speaks, like, sports science. We've seen this in terms of performance. I mean, in esports, performance as well. Like, those guys who do work out all the time and are physically at their peak perform better, and are like, we see these boosts in performance as a result of them, doing this all the time and having balance in their life. So they may be giving 2 or 3 less hours a day to the game, and yet the results are better because they're overall happier, they're overall more willing, and they're at their physical peak in their bodies, and like, we've seen this with nutritionism too, of like, gamers who have better diets perform better. We've seen this across esports, and just stuff like that, where we're seeing that not just as a preventative measure for negative things like depression, but actually, in terms of, if you want an esports career, it's also a boost in a positive way. So it's not just, it's not just, to avoid these things, you have to do this extra stuff. It's like, it's actually gaining you something as well as avoiding negatives like that. It's just overall beneficial. And I like that we have more people speaking out about it. Like, I love that, like, Archie has taken his platform and really emphasized, like, kind of that whole movement of like self-improvement and discipline and working out and all that, because a lot of young boys look up to him, and especially in the gaming space, because he was balancing the Fortnite. Now he's kind of transitioning out of it. But Mongrel too, you see Mongrel took this massive like undertaking of like, he just got really fit and buff and started working out, and now he's kind of transitioned out, and but he can still come back and perform. I mean, he still plays Fortnite at a crazy level, and
he can turn on his stream and get 60,000 viewers playing OG Fortnite, competing in OG Fortnite. Like,
he had like 40K sitting in the solo victory lobby the other day.
Bro, it's insane. And I mean, honestly, good for him. He deserves it. Like,
he deserves it.
He truly is. Like, it's funny because he's one of those examples of like, he left to focus on the business side of life.
Yeah.
And then realized like the opportunities he had as a creator. So then started bringing the business stuff to his creating. And then OG Fortnite comes back and he's like, oh, you
Yeah.
know what? I'll dabble in this a little bit, right? I'll
Yeah.
compete in a few
Yeah.
events, do this, that, and the third. And easily, like,
Yeah.
he's probably had, I don't want to speculate, but probably a 30 to $60,000 month
Yeah.
and probably streaming alone.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
And depending on how many hours he streamed and all that stuff, like
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
really, like there's certain metrics that come into play. But like we saw Ninja leak his
Yeah.
stats,
Mhm.
and it was like
Jeez, man.
$140,000, and that was only like 2 weeks of streaming.
Yeah.
At that point, that he had gotten his sub button back and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, and most of that came from ads, which is why I believe like Mongrel's in a really good spot, because if he has 30 to 60K viewers, right, during an event, and he's playing, and ads are running every hour,
Yeah.
he's making a pretty decent bag.
Yeah. I
Decent an understatement.
so something so I
Decent is
yeah.
understatement.
So I grew up in the sports industry, in the sports scene. I played football, basketball, baseball growing up.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite things about sports in general, because I coached them as well. I just loved everything about it. I loved competing. I loved honing the skills and the it was the discipline thing. That was a segue to this, because I know that seems like a random. I love self-disciplining and just making yourself put in the time to be the best that you can be. And one of my favorite things about sports was that it acts as a metaphor for life. So many, and the best coaches know how to draw those comparisons. And I know I was very fortunate in my careers, especially football. The best football coaches I ever had were the guys who were better men and better influences off the field than on.
Yeah.
And I think esports, that's something that I've grown to love about esports as well, because esports is a metaphor for life in a lot of ways as well. And really any competition that you get into is going to be that way. But I'm finding this more and more and more with esports, like balance. We talk about balance in esports performance, but it's also just a life thing. Like almost every piece of advice that you'll hear in esports is translatable to life as well. And balance is a big one for that as well. I mean, I was very lucky to be a very multivariate person. I was in the performing arts, I was in sports, I was in, academics. And that I'm extremely grateful that my parents encouraged me to be as well-rounded as possible, because I think it's given me a very rich life already. And I just feel like I'm more prepared than a lot of my peers to face the world and to, to have the best life experience that I can possibly have. But that's something about esports, man, is don't take it for granted and allow it to be a metaphor for something bigger. Allow it to be, allow it to be life lessons. Don't just think about it in terms of just Fortnite. Like Fortnite at the end of the day is just a game. And yes, it's built careers and it's this awesome thing that changed the world, but like take that and use it in something beyond that. And I think that's what we're seeing with some of these creators too, is like the discipline that they gained from being a pro player, playing 8 hours a day, is helping them in the business world. It's helping them in, to be successful in other ways as well. So, I don't know. I drew that comparison. And that was one thing that I really loved about sports. And, I think esports should head in that direction as well. It's just like, it's a metaphor for life and you should treat it as such.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
That's fair. I think people, can really connect to that message, and also connect to the fact that like someone that spends 12 hours a day doing something isn't necessarily going to be the best at it, right? Because there are people that spend 6 hours a day intentionally using every moment of that time being more effective than someone that spends 12 hours a day ineffectively using the same amount of
There's
that
efficiency.
same, double
It's
amount
efficiency.
of time.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like I think the best pros are the ones that do find balance, and also still do focus the game at a high level. Like, to be fair, part of the reason I think the European region is so strong is that they are just innately healthier than Americans are, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that is in part like one of those like small reasons as to their overall success, right?
Yeah.
Because the American lifestyle is not healthy
Yeah.
Not
at all. Like,
yeah. No kidding.
like literally, I'll have a crazy day stacked up, right, from start to finish, what am I going to do? I'm going to get on DoorDash, right?
Yeah.
And once I get on DoorDash, I live in the middle of nowhere. What are my options? Well, Taco Bell, Wendy's,
Yeah.
Pizza Hut, like.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like I find myself getting stuck in this rut, and it's like, oh, now okay, well I can actually get vegetables, like steamed vegetables or whatever, and I'll throw that in the freezer. Then I start pulling that out, and I eat steamed vegetables for 3 days, and I'm like, nope, I'm going back to DoorDash. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
there is that uh that that balancing
Yeah.
act that
Yeah.
people have to figure out, and innately with the health state of North America, obviously, mixed with how you balance life and prepare for your day. I think those two things are so important to competing life, esports, and everything.
Yeah.
Um, if you're very intentional and you spend 6 hours prepping, practice, competing, whatever,
Yeah.
but also take another 6 hours of that day, a little bit light exercise, talk with friends, do something that disconnects away from what you're going to do for the 6 hours, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And my biggest advice is take 2 hours a day, and this is what's helped me like grow
Mm.
steadily in whatever I do. Is I take usually first 2 hours, and if you don't have 2 hours, take an hour. Everybody can find an hour in the day to learn something new.
Mm.
And so I got that advice. I think it was Bill Gates, like 10 years ago, like 5 to 10 years ago. He had put something out, and I had heard that, and it was very impactful in my life, and I saw it make a pretty steady change in the way
Mm.
that I was able to do things. My
Yeah.
problem solving skills, my editing skills, my anything that I put that focus in
Yeah.
improved, and people don't realize that. Like,
Yeah.
no one can just decide I'm going to start boxing, give me Mike Tyson, right?
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't work that way. It's like you
Yeah.
have to take a step back, take the time to learn. And if you dedicate an hour a day at the very least to learning something new every single day, whether it's writing skills or how to use a camera, like
Yeah.
public speaking, maybe how to understand mechanics in Fortnite. Like, even if you're focused in Fortnite, right, and you really want to be like the best pro, spend an hour a day digesting Fortnite specific content
Yeah.
on improving the game, right? And that's not just saying go watch every YouTuber that's out there, because not all the information is out there on YouTube. Find the Destiny Jesuses of the world,
Yeah.
or some of the Rezon master classes, like these other things that pay that you may have to pay for to unlock, but invest in yourself. And whether that's the time investment to learn, or the actual monetary investment to like improving based on courses and things like that, that's some of the best advice I can give to anybody.
Yeah.
And if you take that time to learn and grow as an individual, you'll find you never go backwards.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I agree.
that kind of fits in. As we begin to wrap up, we kind of have two traditional questions that we ask each guest at the very end. Firstly, is just kind of what's next on the horizon for you. I mean, you talked about your business, and you can take this to a broader sense, like where do you want to be in 5 years? You can take this to like what's in your immediate future, but like what can we expect from Panda coming up?
It's a cool project. It is going to be soft launch in 2024, and then fully public, hopefully by the beginning of 2025.
Yeah.
Part of it is consulting, like it's a services based business.
Okay.
Part of it is consulting, and I have my first like crack at consulting something. It's an activation for the Fortnite scene. I don't know how much my name will be attached to it, but like I'm working with them on that basis, and that will help build the foundation of what I can do and show publicly. Yeah. So
Right.
Yeah.
we'll see how that goes. It is obviously a connection with a big brand as well. So
Yeah.
Shout out. Well, I won't shout them out yet, just so because it's not public. But it will be, I think, a really cool activation for the Fortnite space, and hopefully something that people enjoy. And we will see with the business. I'll be able to produce more of those. But there's multiple facets to the business. It won't just be that. It'll be content creation and stuff. And in 2025, without giving too much information about what the business fully is, I plan on having a content warehouse
Very
in
cool.
North Carolina.
Very cool.
That is stacked to the brim. I already have it built out. Like we're in the buying land phase.
Yeah.
So it's basically structurally set. Equipment and everything that we could possibly need is decided, and
Yeah.
it's one of the first locations that will be it'll be like super beneficial to what I'm doing, what I'm creating, and who I partner with.
Yeah.
But it can also be open potentially to the public in some ways, not like fully to the public, but like the
Yeah.
community.
Yeah.
So some cool stuff. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to give too many ideas to anybody else of what we're working on. But it does play into building the Fortnite scene even more.
Well, hopefully you have a podcast studio and we can get a IRL GhostComms in down the line.
Listen, where you? Well, don't say necessarily publicly where you guys are at, but I have a podcast studio right here, man. For sure, SM7Bs, Roadcaster Pro 2.
I'll have to take another trip to Raleigh. I was there invitation. It's not too far from me. I'll say that.
Cool.
So that's very cool. But yes, and then the last question that we always ask, and you've given a lot of fantastic advice already, but if you had to pick one piece of advice to give to the audience, and this can be Fortnite related, this can be esports career related, this could be whatever, life in general, what would it be?
Just be a decent person. Like genuinely.
Lash gave almost exactly the same answer. That's so like
it's because Lash and I talk quite often.
Yeah.
But to be honest, it literally is just be a decent person. You don't realize how far that actually goes for you when you're not even trying, right?
Yeah.
Like when you are just authentically and genuinely a good person, more things go your way. And when things don't go your way, your thought isn't, oh, like what can I do to get back at them or this or that and the third. It is, you know what, that happened. I'm gonna learn from it and I'm gonna keep moving.
An important
because
caveat to that.
Be here, not go over here.
An important caveat to that is that you don't being a good person for the motivation of all the benefits is not actually being a good person. Right. Because that's something, especially with morality, that I love morality and ethics. It's probably my favorite branch of philosophy. And that always bugs me because it's like your motivation matters too. If you're only pretending to be a good person or acting how you think a good person would act to try and get something out of someone, that's not being a good person. That's still being selfish. No. So, but yes, if you're a good person, no matter how things go, you can take comfort in that fact that at least I did what was right for what's right's sake. I mean, I did what I'm supposed to because that's what I'm supposed to do. And whatever does or does not come with that is only added benefit. And that, but it'll get you far in life because that's the measure of success for me is, are you giving your sincerest effort to be the best person that you can be? And that, that's it at the end of the day. And it will, I mean, it's funny because when it does kind of have benefits, it's never in the way that you're expecting, at least in my experience, or very rarely. Cause it's like, man, like I had a situation recently, actually, I love that you brought this up. I had a situation where a guy reached out to me and we had worked together in the past. It did not end on fantastic terms. And he texted me and he was like, hey man, like, I think I mentioned him in my stream or like a podcast or something. And he like reached out to me and he's like, hey man, like, cause I didn't say anything negative about him. I gave him kudos for what he does and all of that. And he was like, dude, I'm sorry. Like I treated you like a dick. And like, I hope that we can like move on and be cool. And it was one of the last people in the universe that I was expecting to get that from. And now like, we're cool. Like I was like, yeah, man, like I'm good to put it behind us. Like, and we talked things out. And it was just a really cool moment because I had completely like severed that relationship in my head. Like there's no salvaging this. Like, it's just going to be a person that doesn't like me or whatever. And now like we have a good working relationship. Like, he's involved in the scene. And if I wanted to, have him be involved in a project, or if, he had something that I thought that we could be mutually beneficial on, like I can reach out to him and do that. So it was just a very cool example of like, I took the high road. I could have trashed him for what he did or, what he said about me or whatever. But, and then it actually inspired him to do something that was of good character. And now, everything's cool. So, yeah, I mean, absolutely. And Lash gave a very similar answer. Just be a good person, man. Like, however far that does or does not get you, that should be what you take comfort in at the end of the day. Is I know that I did what's right for what's right's sake.
Well, and again, I think being a good person and acting like a good person are two very different things, right? And that's the difference
absolutely.
that everybody needs to take away from this. While I stand by, if you are a good person, great things will come to you.
Agreed.
Because you don't look at the negatives the way that others do and let it consume them, right?
Yeah.
Because I think people make more mistakes in the pits of negativity and mistakes, right? Like a good person, like is not like what's the word? Is not I can't think of it right now, but it can make mistakes, right? A good person still can make mistakes, right?
Infallible.
And yeah, that's a good one. And so to remember that, like, you can be a good person, you can make those mistakes, but it's how you react, respond, and definitely, like, just take solace in the fact that if you are a good person, no matter what you do, if you are a farmer making $26,000 a year, you have a better quality of life than someone that's making $10 million a year, but they're just they're a terrible person tearing people down left, right, and center. Because at the end of the day, they will not find true happiness in what they do because they are not innately good. And ultimately, that's another battle that they face internally, whereas you are just at peace being able to farm with $26,000 a year. Like, realistically, that is the best way I can put it.
Absolutely.
Being a good person, you will find success, but success is defined in many different ways.
Yeah, that's a great summation. Finally, where can everybody find you?
Twitter.com/LifeWPanda. That's the best place to find me, for sure. Like, I have a YouTube, it's Life with Panda, and TikTok, LifeWPanda, but like, I don't really focus on those platforms. I let those just do what they do. I'm always on Twitter. I'm always staying connected with the community. If you have questions, you want to talk to me, my DMs are open. Let the floodgate come in. I'm ready for it. I'm always down to chat.
Just
with
don't
people.
ask about Chapter 5.
Just
or don't ask for the Chapter 5 battle pass.
No Chapter 5 battle pass. I don't know.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this episode of GhostComms. Make sure you go and follow Panda. We'll have his socials linked below. You can listen to GhostComms now. Also on Apple Podcasts, we've added Apple Podcasts. So we have, all your traditional listening platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube if you want the video version. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you all in the next one. Peace.
Later, everybody.